suggestion to stop spending time with Toby for the last few weeks he was at our house. I knew Kim was curious about Toby, so it felt right to end things before they went too far. She probably felt the same way, as curiosity can lead to trouble for anyone, especially with me leaving soon. In a week, I would be heading to Italy, and Kim planned to join me on Friday. We would explore Italy together. So, we were back to our usual routine. I was reading a book about a knight who reluctantly took on a young helper, while Kim was watching a European gaming tournament on her phone. I wondered if she still thought about Toby, but as she focused on the match, I felt sure she was okay with our decision. Maybe she didn't like how close things had gotten the night before. She had hinted at that, and her behavior made me believe it was true. I didn't think Kim would lie, but sometimes feelings can be confusing. Maybe we should get a TV up here too, I joked, turning off the lamp. Kim grunted, trying to concentrate on the game. Good night, I said with a yawn, and turned to sleep. That night I slept soundly but woke up suddenly, feeling like I had just fallen asleep. I remembered a dream about being locked up. The strange thing was, I hadn't done anything wrong in the dream, yet being in jail made me feel guilty. After shaking my head, I realized I was still in bed, with Kim sleeping next to me. So why couldn't I shake the feeling? Dreams can be weird. Wow, I thought, rolling out of bed. I must have been really tired. I went to the kitchen to make coffee and found 2 mugs. When I returned to the bedroom with our mugs, Kim was already awake, looking at me with a sleepy smile. Morning, she said. I glanced at her and we shared a laugh. Good morning, I replied. We lay in bed for a while, listening to each other's breathing. It was a warm, early summer morning, and we looked out at our lovely yard. Maybe one day we could get someone to help with the garden, but the green grass looked nice too. I had grown to love the smell of fresh-cut grass after moving to Indiana, unlike our days in the suburbs of Detroit. After a bit, Kim spoke up. How are you? She asked. I'm good, I said, and she nodded. And you? Me too, Kim said, sipping her coffee. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Do you know what I was thinking about this morning? She asked. What were you thinking about, honey? I replied. The trip to Italy, she said with a smile. I chuckled. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yes, it will be, she said confidently, squeezing my hand again. I wonder if we could spend a whole day at the beach, I said. Kim giggled. Oh, yes, that sounds amazing. I could soak up the sun all day, and all that delicious pizza and pasta waiting for us. Josh, we're going to enjoy ourselves over there. I laughed again. And you'll love every moment, I said. After that, I got dressed and went downstairs. I made us each a fresh cup of coffee. Turning around, I saw Kim coming down the stairs wearing white shorts and a snug white top. She looked ready for our Italian adventure. Kim gave me a sweet kiss and a hug. Are we ready to go? I joked. Yes, we are, she replied with a big smile. I noticed Kimberly was avoiding me. It was clear. Maybe I should have seen it coming after everything. But deep down, I knew she was interested. I remembered how she reacted before. However, now she seemed to be ignoring me completely, even skipping her usual visits at night. I could play that game too. I could keep my distance just as well. I noticed she would steal glances when she thought I wasn't watching. Even though she avoided me, we still had a few moments alone. On Monday morning, while she was doing laundry, I pretended to check on my clothes. I could see it in her eyes. There was a spark of curiosity there. She looked like she expected something to happen, but I simply checked the washer and walked away without saying a word. Later that day, something similar happened, though it was a little more surprising. Kimberly was bent over in the kitchen, and I couldn't help but look. She was rummaging through a drawer. When she turned around and saw me, she was a bit startled. Our eyes met, but instead of taking a step closer, I turned and left. It felt as if she wanted me to do something, but I didn't. From Tuesday to Friday, I made sure to keep my distance from Kimberly. I stayed in my room, focusing on my work, which was developing a small mobile app. This project was an important part of my plans. I was creating a second phone that mirrored Josh's. When they were in Nebraska, I borrowed his phone to set it up. On Saturday, Kimberly and I were alone in the house for the first time in a while. Josh was busy with his activities, so I decided to take the chance to go for a swim. As I swam, I saw Kimberly mowing the lawn. She was wearing a red shirt and denim shorts, and I could hear the sound of the tractor she was using to mow the large lawn, After finishing a few laps, I got out of the pool and walked towards her. She noticed me and stopped the tractor. "Oh," she said, realizing I was standing there. "How's it going?" I asked, nodding towards the half-mowed lawn. She smiled and said, "It's okay, but my arms are getting tired. I think I'll take a break." We stood there for a moment, quietly. There was a tension in the air, as if we both knew that things could have been different. The unspoken thoughts of what might have happened between us lingered, but I decided not to act on it. Instead, I turned and headed back inside for a shower. I went to the shower behind the kitchen, knowing that Kimberly often used it after doing yard work. While I washed up, I thought about everything that had been happening, but I reminded myself to be patient. There was no need to rush things. Then I heard the bathroom door open slightly, and I knew Kimberly had come in. For a brief moment, there was silence, but I decided it wasn't the right time to let things go any further. I quickly finished my shower and moved on, knowing tomorrow would bring another day. Kimberly had taken off her shirt, and without saying a word, I could tell there was a strong sense of tension in the air. I tried to keep things light, smiling and acting casual. "Hey there," I said, keeping my voice calm. It took her a moment to respond, as she seemed a little caught off guard. "Oh, hi," she replied, her voice soft. "You here for a shower?" I asked, stepping aside as if giving her space. She didn't move, just stood there like she wasn't sure what to do next. "Yeah, just finished mowing the lawn, got a bit dirty," she answered, glancing at me quickly. "Well, seems like you've been busy," I joked, trying to keep things light. She gave a small laugh in response, but then, instead of pushing things further, I simply walked past her and left the room. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right move. I could sense she was on edge, but there was no need to act on it just yet. Patience was important. As for Josh and me, we spent a lot of time together during that last week. We rode bikes, played golf, even though neither of us was any good, and just enjoyed the warm weather. We didn't see much of Toby, except in the mornings or sometimes when he went for a swim. It seemed like things were settling down, though his quietness was a little surprising. There were moments when it felt like Toby might try something, but he didn't. It was actually a relief. I had been feeling uneasy, especially when he was around. It was tough, especially when we were both alone in the house, but I kept reminding myself to stay calm and stay focused. It felt like an internal battle sometimes, but I knew it was best to keep everything in check. Then came Saturday. I was lying on a sun lounger when I noticed a shadow appear over me. I opened my eyes and saw Toby standing there, blocking the sun. "You're in the way, Toby," I said with a light laugh, trying to keep things casual. "Move your hand," Toby demanded. I sighed and shook my head. We shouldn't do this anymore. It's over, and besides, Josh would never let this slide. "He's gone, off running errands," Toby replied. My heart dropped. I had been keeping my distance from Toby all week, staying busy and avoiding any time alone with him. Now, with no one around, Toby stepped closer, sensing the moment. "We can't," I said firmly. "No more of this." Toby didn't listen, guiding my hand toward him. I could feel the tension rise, but I quickly pulled my hand away. "You remember what happened the last time? It didn't end well," I said, trying to break the tension with a smile. But Toby took a seat next to me, his confidence growing. He grabbed my hand again, making it clear he wasn't going to stop. His words were persuasive, and I could feel the pressure building. "You've thought about it, haven't you?" he said, his voice low. "About how things felt before?" I pulled away, knowing this wasn't right. His words made me feel uneasy, but part of me struggled to react. Toby kept pushing, trying to convince me that I wanted this. He mentioned how he was leaving soon, and how there wouldn't be another chance. I didn't respond. I knew I needed to end this, but for some reason, I stayed frozen. Toby grabbed my hand again, but I quickly let go and stood up, stopping him before anything else could happen. Without a word, I walked away, knowing I had to keep my distance before things went any further. Toby moved to the end of the lounger where I lay, his movements deliberate. He knelt between my legs, and though I should have stopped him, I didn't. My mind was clouded, my pulse racing, and everything felt distant, like I wasn't truly there. He pressed against me, his actions firm and clear. I knew I should put an end to it, but my body seemed frozen, unable to respond. I felt torn between what I knew was right and the confusing emotions swirling inside me. Josh would be back soon, but in that moment everything felt out of control. Toby continued, his words pushing at the edge of reason. "You want this, don't you?" he whispered, his voice confident. I didn't respond, only watching as he teased, pushing the boundaries without going too far. My mind screamed for it to stop, but my body betrayed me, responding in ways I didn't expect. He kept testing my limits, making the situation harder to walk away from. "We shouldn't," I managed to say, though my voice was weak. But Toby ignored it, continuing as if he knew the battle I was fighting inside. We were both lost in the moment, the tension between us growing, but I still knew this wasn't right. I tried to push him away, but his strength was overpowering and I couldn't gather the will to stop him. His hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. In a moment of confusion, I kissed him, though my mind screamed for me to stop. The situation felt out of control, and as he pressed closer, I shut my eyes, trying to block out the chaos of emotions overwhelming me. Despite everything happening, deep down, I knew it had to end. I needed to walk away before things went any further. Emotions swirled together as I realized something strange. We were both feeling intense pleasure without even being intimate. It was just some close contact. "Wow, you're really impressive," I said, breathless and lost in the moment. He couldn't respond. "Much bigger than Josh," I blurted out unexpectedly. I didn't even know why I said that. It just came out, almost like I was reminding myself. Suddenly, Toby pulled back. I opened my eyes and saw him holding himself, looking surprised. At that moment, I understood that I had almost pushed him too far. After a quick pause, Toby leaned in again. I couldn't help but make a noise of appreciation, welcoming the feeling of closeness. He began to move against me faster, his hands gripping me lightly, urging me to pay attention. "Look at me," Toby said firmly. I nodded and focused on his eyes, which looked filled with desire. He seemed to be enjoying the moment completely. Toby continued his movements, and I could sense his excitement. I longed for something more, something deeper. "You wanted this, didn't you? You wish I'd take control, right?" Toby said with a hint of urgency. I didn't answer. I was too focused on my feelings. I knew I shouldn't admit it, even if the thought had crossed my mind since our earlier closeness. "Tell me," Toby urged again. "Yes, I started, but hesitated. "Say it," he insisted, his voice rising. "Say you want me." "You can't," I replied, my voice shaky. "Wow, you're really impressive." Toby shot me a knowing grin, sensing how close I was to giving in. "Just tell me," he urged, moving again in a way that sparked my desire. "Who is bigger?" "You're much bigger, Toby. Oh my," I found myself saying without thinking. With a grin, Toby slowed down, letting out a long sigh. It was like he could feel the effect he was having on me. I felt like I was on the edge of giving in completely to him. "Okay, that's enough," Toby said with effort. Just when I thought he was going to take things further, I felt him pull away. I opened my eyes to see him adjusting his pants and walking back toward the house. Neither of us had truly reached a finish, so where was he going? Was he really leaving me like this? How did he have such control? I couldn't believe how close I had come to crossing a line. I was almost unfaithful to Josh. Somehow, I had held back, yet wasn't it really Toby who had chosen to step back? I found myself wondering if he really liked me or if he was just playing around. Did he want to tease me, or was he simply losing interest? And why did it matter to me so much? If teasing was his goal, he definitely succeeded. Just before Josh left for Italy, it felt like he was trying to make a move on me before Josh even took off. I felt trapped and a bit hurt. It was as if I was torn between wanting to resist and feeling tempted. The struggle left me feeling stuck and confused. I would need to be more focused when we were alone. I probably had to use the same strategy as before, keep my distance. I couldn't believe how much I wanted him, but any mistake could lead to trouble. Honestly, I barely felt like I was part of what was happening. Finally, it was time to go. Kim drove me to Indianapolis in our black F-150. I said new, but it was actually from 1995, just recently purchased. "Don't forget to buy magnets and wine," Kim joked as I was checking in. "And don't forget to water the flowers," I replied playfully. I leaned in to give her a quick kiss and pulled back, saying, "Okay, that's enough, or I'll get too distracted before I leave." "Well, if there's a charming guard checking bags, you might find a way to deal with it," Kim whispered with a grin. "Where did that come from?" I asked, surprised. Maybe our last trip gave her some ideas. I didn't mind, though. "Oh, nothing. Just behave yourself while you're over there," Kim said with a cheeky smile. "What happens if I don't?" I teased. "Is there a punishment?" Kim smiled back, turning me gently to urge me forward. "Miss you too," I said as I let her guide me to security. "Joking aside, I'm really going to miss you, Josh," Kim said as we reached the line. "It's only 5 days, babe," I replied, pulling her into a hug. I felt her head resting against my chest and took a moment to breathe in her scent, wanting to hold on to it for the next few days apart. "See you later," Kim said, leaning up for a kiss. "Alligator," I replied with a smile, then turned and walked toward security. Once I was home, the quiet felt louder without Josh there. He wasn't always around, but since we became a couple in high school, we hadn't been apart for more than a couple of days. 5 days felt like a long time, but I knew it would make seeing each other again even better. Honestly, I couldn't wait to get there. I felt butterflies in my stomach already. Part of me wanted to go with him, but wandering around while he handled his work was not something I looked forward to. However, Italy was one of the places I really wanted to visit. I wasn't sure who loved pasta more, Josh or me, but tasting it right from where it came was something I really wanted to experience. That night, I did something I had never done before. I locked the door to my bedroom before I went to sleep. I didn't think Toby would come in, but it felt like a way to keep him at a distance. Then, I made a plan to keep myself busy the next day. I decided I would go for a run, take a shower, and then run some errands. I needed to think of some errands since I didn't want to make any more mistakes while waiting for my husband. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Josh. He had arrived at the hotel and everything was fine. The hotel was pretty basic, but good enough for now. I couldn't complain. We had planned to keep texting as much as we could and save phone calls for when Josh was settled in for the night. The reception wasn't always good, so it was better to save our conversations for when it was stable. It was well past noon when I finally talked to Josh. We mostly chatted about work until he started to feel tired. It was late there, and he had a long flight and an early morning to think about. He mentioned that they were going to Torino for a ski trip in the middle of summer. "Lucky you," I teased. "It's not all work then." "Yeah, I didn't expect that. The people here are really nice," Josh replied. "You'll get a summer tan while skiing. That sounds funny," I laughed. "Is it high up in the mountains?" "I think so. I heard the signal might not be great up there, but we'll see." After that, our conversation ended, and it was time for him to get some rest. "How is Josh doing in Italy?" Toby asked later that evening. I was trying to avoid him, but of course, I couldn't. I was eating some delicious crab I had ordered, and Toby walked in. I wasn't sure if he was drawn by the food or something else. Seeing him again made me a little uneasy. I just hoped he wouldn't try anything that I would have to turn down. I regretted getting too close to trouble. I still hadn't told Josh everything, and I wasn't sure how he would feel about it. He had made it clear what he thought about certain things, and Toby had almost crossed that line. "He's doing well. They are going to Torino on Thursday, or is it Wednesday? It's hard to keep track with the different time zones," I replied, trying to keep things polite but brief. "What's in Torino?" "Isn't it supposed to be called Turin?" "You can't change names. The Italians call it Torino, and we should too," I answered firmly. "There's a ski resort there, even in the summer." Toby didn't respond. He seemed lost in his thoughts. Was he even listening? I was starting to feel annoyed. He expected me to always be there for him, but now he was ignoring me. Instead of talking, he went to the fridge to find a snack. I finished my meal and headed to the office to play video games, a good way to let off some steam. So, Wednesday night to Thursday would likely be the turning point. I planned to use my little app to win over Kimberly. I would make her think that Josh was okay with it by sending some well-crafted messages. It wasn't the best plan, but I was in a hurry and had convinced her we were meant to be together after spending time with her before. I needed to give her a reason to fully commit. I looked up where Josh was staying. It wasn't crucial, but I wanted everything to feel real for Kimberly. She needed to believe it was fine to make decisions without a phone call. Everything seemed to fall into place for us to act like a couple should, with eagerness. What made this plan tough was keeping Josh busy with harmless responses and small talk. Luckily, I could just search "how to talk with your partner" and found some tips that I used on him. It was important to keep him from trying to contact me in other ways. The next day felt long. Toby kept distracting me with small things even though it was awkward. When he walked by in his wet swim trunks, it was hard not to notice. I felt foggy in my head, especially with how difficult it was to talk to Josh. On Tuesday, I biked and jogged, went out to eat, but eventually returned home. I got lost in my video games, texted Josh, and went to bed. On Wednesday, I also chatted with Josh, who was heading to the mountains. However, later that day, while I was scrolling through Instagram in the kitchen, I got some disappointing news. The pandemic was flaring up again, especially affecting Torino. That meant no travel for 10 days. Josh was stuck at the resort with poor phone service. "This means the flight is canceled," Josh wrote. He added, "At least the insurance will cover the cost." "Great," I said, possibly too loudly. "What's wrong?" Toby asked as he came in from his morning swim. "It's the pandemic," I replied. Toby nodded and quickly walked down the hall. I heard his footsteps echo as he went to his room. I shrugged and turned back to my phone. I didn't respond to Josh right away. Thinking about another 10 days without my husband was overwhelming. I couldn't even plan to travel to Europe during the delay. A minute later, Josh messaged again. "Look, I know I can't be there and we talked about what we wouldn't do. But since I won't be back for a while, I think I can loosen things up. You know what I mean?" This felt unusual. It didn't sound like the way Josh normally communicated. Plus, I had set the boundaries. Maybe the situation had put him in a strange mood, especially since it was getting late for him. Still, I was uncertain about what Josh meant. I had accepted not doing anything with Toby, and now this opened a different door. If Josh was serious about this, he should be aware of what it could lead to. I would have 10 days alone with Toby if that was what Josh really suggested. Even with his permission, I wasn't sure I wanted to take that step. Josh and I were a couple, and that was how I wanted things to stay. I enjoyed some fun, but I was also comfortable with limits. "I don't know. Are you sure? This is a big step. I don't even know if I want to," I replied. "I'm just saying if you want to, it's okay. Just keep me updated. I might not watch everything, but I'd like to be in the loop," Josh responded quickly. He seemed very confident about this. Then my phone pinged with another surprising message. "Just go talk to him right now and see where it goes. You have my permission." I couldn't quite believe Josh was saying this. I waited a few minutes, hoping he would change his mind, but he didn't. "Are you really sure?" I asked, wanting to be clear. Even with his reassurance, I wasn't sure I was ready for anything. It had been a long day and I was tired. Part of me was also scared. I feared what could happen if Toby got close to me again. I had hesitated before, and I didn't want to take any more chances. "Sure, no problem," Josh replied quickly, adding, "I'm off to bed. Enjoy yourself." That was it. Josh was going to bed. I canceled my plans, grabbed my phone, and moved to the space between the lounge area and the kitchen. I glanced down the hall. To my right was the annex where Toby was likely busy with his game. What was it called again? I shook my head and headed to the pool instead. I expected Kimberly to come down at any time. Minutes passed. I began to worry that she wasn't coming to my room. I thought I had done everything right. So why wasn't she here? With Josh out of the way, there was no reason for her not to join me. What was happening? I stood up from my game and went to the hallway to see if Kimberly was on her way. It felt uncertain to seek her out like this, but I figured I could say I was looking for her. But there was still no sign of her. She'd been busy with her game earlier. I went to the kitchen and found she wasn't there either. I looked outside and saw her cleaning the pool. Maybe I should invite her to the pool again. Kimberly had gone into the pool house. I decided to follow her and sat down on the deck in the shade, waiting. After a while, Kimberly finally came out. I felt my heart race as I sat in the wooden chair. Her hair was damp after her time in the pool house, and she was wearing a white swimsuit. I could see the water glistening on her shoulders, and she looked great. I wanted to talk to her, but the pool was between us. My hands tightened into fists as she walked around the pool toward me, then over to the ladder. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kimberly just smiled at me. "This is all your fault," I said, trying to keep it light. I wanted to be playful around her. She laughed and stepped up to the patio deck. When she stood a few feet away, she looked me over with curiosity. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You know what I mean," I replied, standing up to meet her gaze. Kimberly stepped closer. She looked up at me, and our bodies nearly touched. I noticed that familiar spark in her eyes. "Do you need some help with that?" she teased, and I nodded in response. "And what kind of help would that be?" she asked. Kimberly was playing around, but I leaned in and kissed her. It was a mix of passion and warmth. I had seen similar scenes in movies, and now it was happening in real life. I felt her lean into me, wrapping her arms around my neck. There was a softness to her touch, and the way she responded made everything feel so real and intense. Her quiet gasps and the softness of her lips brought everything to a head, making it impossible to resist the moment. Gently, I pulled her toward a nearby table. With her help, I slowly untied the strap of her swimsuit and slid it off her shoulders. I stayed focused, keeping things calm as I helped her out of it. There was no need to rush. It felt like a dream unfolding as I took a step back, noticing how comfortable she seemed. She whispered, "I can't believe this is happening," and I could hear the excitement in her voice. I smiled, placing my hands gently on her back. I lifted her onto the table, but I didn't want to rush anything. This moment wasn't about giving in to temptation immediately. I wanted her to realize that this was a choice, not something driven by impulse. So, instead of moving forward, I deliberately stepped back, allowing space between us. She had closed her eyes as if expecting something to happen, but nothing came. When she opened them again, she saw I had stepped away, unsure of what was next. "Where are you going?" she asked, surprised that I wasn't moving forward. It was a confusing moment. We had been so close before, but now, here we were, unsure of what to do next. I could sense her frustration, but I didn't want to push anything. The atmosphere felt heavy with anticipation, and even though it seemed like the next step was clear, I hesitated. "We shouldn't," I said softly, knowing that moving forward wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't just about giving in to desire, but also about knowing when to stop. "But," she started, clearly wanting to say more but unsure how to continue. The tension between us was undeniable, but I knew walking away was the right decision. She looked at me, her frustration obvious. "Toby!" she called, almost pleading. She let out a deep sigh, her gaze locked on mine, but I still stood there, making sure not to push any further. She paused for a moment, realizing the importance of what was happening. It was clear that even though emotions were high, this was a situation where stepping back was the best choice. Toby smiled slowly, realizing he had the upper hand. He knew I had been waiting for this moment, and now it seemed inevitable. "Is that what you want?" Toby asked, his voice calm but confident. I nodded, feeling like I was done with the back and forth, ready to end the teasing. "I just need to make sure with Josh," I said, reaching for my phone. Toby handed it to me. He kind of gave me the okay, but I need to double check. I quickly typed a message to Josh, hoping the response would be what I expected. I watched the phone closely, waiting for the reply. Soon the message came through. "Have fun." A simple response, but it was all I needed. With a resigned look, I tossed the phone aside and turned my attention back to Toby. There was a mixture of emotions in my chest, but at that moment, desire took over. Toby looked at me for a moment, his gaze traveling over me, and I could tell he was thinking about what would happen next. "Please," I whispered, not sure what else to say. I could barely keep still, and my mind raced with anticipation. Toby remained calm, moving slowly, as if in control of every second. He dropped his shorts, and I let out a small gasp. The air between us was thick with tension, and I felt like the moment stretched on forever. "You've thought about this for a while, haven't you?" Toby asked as he took his place between my legs. I nodded, barely able to find my voice. Before I could respond, the reality of the situation hit me, and I felt a mix of emotions. It was overwhelming, and as he got closer, I realized how serious it was. I tried to stay calm, but everything felt so intense. Toby paused for a moment, as if waiting for me to adjust to everything that was happening. "Careful," I whispered, feeling a sudden rush of nerves. Everything was happening so quickly, and I wasn't sure how to process it all. We both stayed quiet for a moment, trying to catch our breath. It felt like the world had slowed down, and I wasn't sure what to expect next. As I looked up, Toby seemed just as caught up in the moment as I was, and the intensity of the situation was clear in his expression. Without any restrictions this time, everything felt different. Kimberly looked at me with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Could you go a bit deeper? I want to see how it feels, she said softly. I moved forward a little more, giving her what she asked for, but only just enough. I wanted to keep the moment slow and controlled. Each movement was careful, not rushing anything. Her breath caught as I adjusted my pace, staying steady. This feels unreal, she muttered, still trying to process everything. I kept the conversation light, teasing her slightly. Think this is going to continue after today? I asked, testing her resolve. Maybe, she said, her voice a little shaky but still playful. I could tell she was trying to stay composed, but the tension between us was clear. We were both navigating this strange situation with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. I kept my focus, trying not to lose control, but the moment was intense. Every movement made her react, and it was hard to keep a calm demeanor. Is this what you imagined? I asked gently. Her response came in a breathless whisper. It's different. But yeah, I can't believe it. I continued with slow, deliberate movements, careful not to rush. There was no need to hurry. We both knew the situation required a delicate approach. Kimberly stayed focused, but I could tell she was already caught up in the moment, adjusting to everything happening. Ever felt anything like this before? I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though the moment was heavy with tension. No, never like this, she answered, clearly overwhelmed. I could tell she was near her limit, and I kept things steady, not wanting to push too far. We both shared this quiet understanding of what was happening. It was a mix of confusion, excitement, and the knowledge that things were about to change, but I stayed calm, letting the moment pass naturally. In the silence that followed, it felt like we had reached an unspoken agreement, both realizing the weight of everything happening, but knowing that it was time to bring things to an end before it went any further. I picked up the pace, keeping my focus, and asked, Is this what you want? Kimberly couldn't respond with words, only a soft sound escaped her lips. Her breathing became quick and shallow, and I could tell she was close to losing control. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could sense the moment building. Are you ready for this? I asked, continuing to speak calmly, trying to keep the mood light. Kimberly's breathing quickened, and her face showed how overwhelmed she was. She could barely form words, only responding with soft gasps as I continued. Her body reacted instinctively, moving in sync with every motion. It was clear that the situation was overwhelming for both of us, but we kept going, unsure where things would end. Faster, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I adjusted, staying focused, but the weight of the moment grew stronger. The atmosphere was heavy, and the tension had reached its peak. We both knew this was it. This was the moment that had been building for so long. The intensity was overwhelming, but I kept steady, trying to keep control of everything. Kimberly's breathing became uneven, and she gripped my arms tightly. I could feel the tension in her body as everything reached its climax. She was lost in the moment, unable to speak, only gasping for breath. I was close too, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. I stayed in control, letting the moment unfold naturally, but it was hard to keep my focus. The intensity of everything had reached its peak, and I knew there was no turning back. Finally, she gasped, her voice full of urgency. Not like this, she managed to say, but the words came too late. I was already lost in the moment, unable to stop. The tension had built too high, and there was no pulling away now. The silence that followed was heavy. We both lay there, catching our breath, unsure of what to say. The moment had passed, and we both knew things would never be the same again. I could feel the intensity of the moment as I finished, completely spent. Kimberly lay back, exhausted, her breath heavy. There's so much, she murmured, her voice shaky, still trying to recover from everything. For a few more moments I stayed close, but eventually, the overwhelming sensitivity made me stop. I pulled away, both of us needing a break. We had both reached our limits, and I felt drained, both physically and mentally. I stood up, grabbed my clothes, and took a moment to steady myself, feeling a bit shaky. Kimberly remained where she was, clearly exhausted, her eyes closed. I didn't say much, just dressed and looked back at her for a second. If you want more, you know where to find me, I said, knowing the moment had left a mark on both of us. I returned to my room, feeling a mix of emotions, but mostly a sense of accomplishment. Everything had led to this, and I knew there would be more to come. When I walked onto the deck, I had no idea what was about to happen. Everything unfolded so quickly, and before I knew it, I had given in to the moment. It wasn't what I expected, but I felt oddly relieved afterward. Now there was no more wondering, no more curiosity. I had experienced it, and that was enough. I wasn't sure how to feel at first, but deep down I was glad it happened. It answered all the lingering what-ifs that had been on my mind. Josh had encouraged me, and while I wasn't sure why, it had made this moment possible. Normally, I wasn't someone who would go for this, but something about Toby brought out a side of me I didn't recognize. Afterward, I decided to send Josh a message. So I did it, I wrote, curious about his response. To my surprise, he replied quickly. "How did it go? Did you like it?" he asked. "Yeah, it was something I needed to try at least once," I responded. "But I have a question." "What?" came his quick reply. "Should I stop taking the pill? I mean, I don't think this will happen again, but still," I asked, trying to keep things light. "I thought you already stopped," Josh replied. I was taken aback. "You knew the risk?" I asked, surprised by his response. "Doesn't that make it exciting?" he replied. I paused, confused by this side of Josh I hadn't seen before. It felt risky, and while part of me found the idea of danger intriguing, I couldn't quite believe how things had turned out. We had come a long way from the early days when things were simple and straightforward. Josh had gotten used to some unusual situations over time, and I knew Toby had been subtly pushing boundaries. As strange as it all was, I had played along, telling myself it was just a bit of fun. "Hot wife," I said to myself, testing the word, feeling the weight of it. As I read Josh's last message, my mind started to turn. I hadn't thought about being with Toby again, but now the idea crept in. Josh had given me the green light, and Toby's confident words, "You know where to find me," echoed in my head. Without thinking too much, I found myself heading back inside the house. Later, as I lay alone in bed, my thoughts kept drifting back to what had happened on the deck. I couldn't stop thinking about Toby, about how different he made me feel. I cared deeply for Josh, and things were great between us. But Toby had been something entirely unexpected. He had stirred feelings I hadn't fully explored before. There was a sense of guilt that lingered, knowing I had crossed a line. But at the same time, the excitement of doing something so out of the ordinary brought a strange thrill. It was all so new, and the way Toby had influenced everything, including the dynamic with Josh, had surprised me. Maybe that's why I returned to my own bed. A part of me felt like keeping some boundaries intact, even though everything had already changed. Being alone in the house, though, gave me a sense of freedom that made my heart race. The idea that anything could happen, with no one around, sparked something in me. At first, I thought being with Toby would be a one-time thing, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't done yet. Maybe it would happen again, just to get it out of my system. My mind wandered, imagining different scenarios of what might happen next. The thought of those possibilities filled me with a strange excitement, though I tried not to let it overwhelm me. There were still lines I didn't want to cross, things I didn't want to push too far. As I lay there, I bit my lip, remembering Toby's words from earlier in the day. Toby's words, "You want more? You know where to find me," kept repeating in my head. They were bold, confident, and for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me hated the idea of being drawn into this situation, but another part was starting to accept it. My husband had given me his permission after all, so why not take advantage of the moment? I shook off my hesitation and got out of bed, pulling off my large t-shirt and tossing my clothes into the laundry basket. I didn't even stop to look in the mirror. My mind was already set. "I can't believe I'm doing this again," I whispered to myself. But any second thoughts quickly faded as I headed downstairs. I moved quietly down the hallway toward Toby's room, each step making my heart race a little faster. As I reached his door, the air felt thick with tension. I raised my hand to the doorknob, pausing for just a moment before turning it and stepping inside. Locking the door behind me, I felt the weight of what was about to happen, but instead of fear, there was a strange sense of excitement. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the moon through the window. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. It was quiet, almost too quiet. As I approached his bed, I saw a large mound under the blanket. Toby seemed still, maybe even asleep. I moved closer, unsure of what to expect. Suddenly, before I could react, the blanket shifted. A gust of air hit me, and I felt a hand grab my arm, pulling me onto the bed. I gasped in surprise, but Toby quickly covered my mouth with his hand. "I knew you'd come back," he whispered, his voice low and sure. The thick air under the blanket surrounded us, but all I could do was breathe and take in the moment. As I lay there, I quickly realized where the musty smell was coming from, probably from Toby spending too much time in bed. Suddenly, I felt his arm wrap around me, pulling me closer to his bare chest. I gasped in surprise, realizing he wasn't wearing anything either. "Toby," I whispered, trying to pull away, confused by the situation. "Have you been waiting here the whole time? How did you know I was coming?" "I just knew," he replied, his voice calm. "I was getting ready for you." I was taken aback, unsure how to respond. Everything felt strange, and the situation was getting intense. I shifted, feeling the tension in the air. "You feel that?" Toby asked, his tone casual but with a knowing edge. I hesitated, unsure of how to react. "Let's not do this," I muttered, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. But Toby leaned in, pulling me closer, his arm still wrapped around me. It was clear he wanted more, but I wasn't sure where this was heading. At that moment, I made a quick decision, pulling myself away from the situation. The air felt heavy, and I knew I needed space. Without saying another word, I slipped out of the room, letting the tension settle as I walked away. As the tension built up inside me with each passing moment, suddenly, everything came to a halt. "Toby, why did you stop?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Toby grinned down at me, clearly amused. He seemed to take a moment to enjoy the situation, as if he was in control of everything. His voice was low when he spoke again. "If I keep going, I might spoil you for Josh," he said quietly. A chill ran down my spine. "Oh, no," was all I could manage to say. Toby leaned closer, asking, "Do you like how this feels? How different it is?" I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm not even all the way in, and I'm already deeper than Josh ever was." He began moving again, slowly, his gaze fixed on me, watching every reaction. "If I go further, you'll only want this. Is that what you really want?" he asked. I shook my head, though my thoughts were a mess. "Say it, Kimberly," he continued, clearly wanting me to answer, but I couldn't form the words. "Is Josh anything like this?" he asked, pushing the question further. "No," I finally replied, my voice breaking. Toby smirked, not saying anything for a moment before moving slowly again. Every inch felt overwhelming, and I couldn't focus on anything else. His movements were deliberate, each one more intense than the last. "I'm taking you somewhere Josh never has," Toby whispered, keeping the same steady rhythm. He was relentless, and the pressure built up inside me, stronger with every second. I could barely breathe as he asked, "Do you still think we should stop?" "No," I stammered, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. "Good," Toby said, his voice thick with confidence. He looked at me, waiting for the final confirmation. I felt myself on the edge, and all I could do was nod as my mind clouded with everything happening. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but in that moment, there was no turning back. "What are you—" "Tell me, Kimberly," Toby said through gritted teeth, his movements becoming more intense. I gasped, overwhelmed by everything happening. I can't!" I stammered, barely able to form words. "You want this to continue?" he asked, pushing me to respond. "Yes!" I cried out without thinking, the pressure building up. "I can't stop!" The words left my mouth in a rush, and I wasn't sure what I was saying anymore. "Even if Josh knew?" Toby pressed, his tone demanding. I wasn't thinking clearly, just reacting to everything. "Yes! Yes!" I responded, lost in the moment. Toby picked up the pace, his strength surprising me. I felt caught in a whirlwind, as if everything around me blurred, and only the tension between us remained. The heat in the room rose, and the space under the blanket felt stifling. My heart raced, and I could feel every inch of the moment pressing in on me. "Should I stop?" Toby asked, his voice quieter now, though still full of control. "No," I answered quickly, almost desperate. Everything was spinning, and I couldn't pull myself out of it. The air felt thick as we both struggled to catch our breath. The room was heavy with tension, and every second that passed felt like we were pushing further into something we couldn't undo. Toby leaned in, his presence overwhelming as he whispered, "You really like this, don't you?" I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed silent, trying to hold on to any remaining sense of control. But it was clear that Toby was enjoying the power he had over the situation, and I felt like I was being swept away. "Doesn't this feel different from before?" he asked, still pressing for answers. I nodded slightly, barely able to speak. "Yes," I whispered, knowing that everything about this moment had crossed a line. As the intensity grew, I couldn't help but feel conflicted, torn between the sense of wrongness and the way Toby kept pushing forward. His confidence was unnerving, and for a moment I feared that he might be right, that this situation had gone too far and there was no turning back. I was getting lost in the moment, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. The thought of stopping seemed so distant now, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to. "Toby!" I gasped. "Don't stop!" Toby responded by picking up the pace, his movements growing faster and more intense. The pressure was building inside me, but it felt like the world outside had disappeared, leaving only this overwhelming sensation. The air under the blanket had grown hot and suffocating, and just as I was starting to feel lightheaded, Toby threw the blanket aside. The cool air hit our skin, bringing a much-needed sense of relief. With that, everything felt sharper, more intense as we continued, time slipping away. I didn't know how long we stayed like that. Minutes, hours. It was impossible to tell. Everything blended together, and I was caught up in the moment, my mind blank as the intensity washed over me again and again. Eventually, Toby whispered in my ear, "I'm close." I was too exhausted to respond, my body worn out. All I could do was make a soft sound, though I didn't mean for it to signal anything more. Toby, clearly taking it as encouragement, groaned, "I'm going to finish." His words suddenly hit me, and I tried to say something, but I was too overwhelmed. My voice failed me, and all that came out were soft breaths as I tried to regain control. With a final push, Toby sighed heavily, collapsing beside me. We both lay there, breathing hard, the moment slowly fading as reality crept back in. I was left in a daze, not sure how to process what had just happened and feeling a strange mix of emotions. As we lay there, the weight of everything pressed down on me. This wasn't what I wanted, but in the chaos of it all, I had lost control. Now, all I could do was try to gather my thoughts and figure out where to go from here. I'm going to miss Josh a lot over the next few days. Toby may have been a bit awkward at first, but he learned quickly. The more time we spent together, the more my body reacted to him. He seemed eager to stay close, waking me up several times during the night. Eventually, I did manage to get some sleep. "I didn't think it would fit me, but it does," I said, surprised in the morning. After making coffee, I heard Toby's footsteps coming down the hall. We had shared some special moments during the night. Part of me felt like those experiences were just a dream, but when we were together in the kitchen, it all felt real. I noticed how his workouts were showing results. He wasn't overly muscular, but he definitely had built some strength. "And why does it fit?" Toby teased. Because you've changed me. I don't think my time with Josh will ever be the same," I said, trying to keep up as he continued. I knew he liked this kind of talk, so I tried to give him what he wanted. It seemed to inspire him even more. I wondered what it would be like with Josh. He was big, strong, and caring. Toby was different, focused on his own enjoyment, and didn't seem to consider my situation. It felt like that thought encouraged him to take charge and enjoy himself. Toby watched as he moved with me, noticing how my body responded. He picked up the pace, clearly enjoying himself. I felt a familiar wave of sensation take over, making me gasp. "Yes, Kimberly," he said, excited. I could feel him getting ready to finish, but he kept going quickly. I knew he was close. He seemed focused on his own release, and I could feel the intensity building. It was all so overwhelming. I lost track of how many times he had reached that point. Each time felt like a blur, but I was caught up in the moment, enjoying the connection we shared. I could definitely see this becoming a routine, but I knew things needed to change. Josh and I had plans to start a family when he returned, and I couldn't risk anything now. Toby had to stop ignoring that. I glanced at my reflection in the microwave, noticing how disheveled I looked. My hair was a mess, makeup smeared, and my face flushed. It wasn't even noon yet, and I already felt exhausted. I absent-mindedly wiped at the mess, feeling uncomfortable and sticky. There was too much to clean up, and I felt a mix of emotions as I stood there. I realized how far things had gone. Toby had gotten too comfortable, and I had let it happen. It was a risky situation, and while part of me knew this was temporary, it still didn't sit right with me. For the moment, I had become the bored wife stuck at home while her husband was away. It was strange how things had spiraled out of control. I had to take responsibility for letting it get this far. I could hear Toby heading to the shower. I knew that this would end when Josh came home, but for now, I had let Toby take control. This was just a temporary phase, I reminded myself, no matter how much Toby pushed for more. Kimberly had finally given in. She was no longer just Josh's wife. Now she was mine to enjoy. The plan had worked up to this point. With Josh away, I had Kimberly all to myself, and everything was falling into place. I kept up the appearance of normalcy by sending Josh harmless texts, making it seem like nothing was out of the ordinary. But when he returned in 2 weeks, things would be different. By then, Kimberly would be completely drawn in, thinking this was what she wanted all along. My next goal was clear, to further weaken the bond between her and Josh, making sure that when he came back, there would be no going back to how things were. I needed to take things slowly, but the result would be worth it. For now, I had Kimberly's attention, and that was all that mattered. Earlier, I had been chipping away at Kimberly's respect for Josh as her husband. Now, I was ready to completely undermine their relationship. I had already made her give vague promises about seeing me even after Josh returned. But my next goal was to ensure Josh knew what was happening, making him doubt everything about his marriage. The key was timing and proof. I needed Josh to see a video of Kimberly that made it look like she wasn't aware she was being recorded. The goal was to make him wonder, how long has this been going on? While knowing there were still 2 weeks left before he could come back and confront anything, I wanted him to lay awake at night, imagining what I was doing and questioning his wife. At the same time, I knew Kimberly was upstairs getting ready for tennis with Josh's sister, Luna, who was likely waiting somewhere outside. I decided this was the perfect opportunity to disrupt her plans and make sure she was late. I found Kimberly in the bedroom, wearing only black shorts. She turned quickly when she noticed me. "Oh, you startled me," she said, surprised by my sudden presence. We had never been in her and Josh's room together, but I had spent plenty of time in other parts of her life. Trying to act casual, I asked, "Heading out?" She nodded, still looking a little unsure about me being in the room they shared. She walked into the bathroom, and I saw my chance. I quickly set up a small camera on Josh's nightstand, intending to record everything. I knew it would have a powerful effect later. Kimberly returned from the bathroom, now dressed in tight white yoga pants over her shorts. I hit record and sat on the bed. "We can't do anything in here, Toby," she said, glancing between me and her tennis gear. She seemed annoyed but unsure. "Why not?" I asked, casually sitting up. I knew her hesitation meant this was the moment to push things further. The fact that she saw her room as a sacred space meant this was where I had to break the boundary. I reached out and touched the fabric of her yoga pants, gently pulling them down a bit. She hesitated, then let them slide to mid-thigh. I stood up, guiding her hands away from her tennis outfit. There was tension in the air, but I knew I was crossing a line she hadn't expected. In her hesitation, I knew the power of this moment. But in my mind, this was all part of the plan to undermine everything between her and Josh. "Luna's waiting for me," Kimberly said, sounding unsure, but I could tell she wasn't fully committed to leaving. I gently turned her around, guiding her toward the bed. She seemed hesitant but didn't resist. I knew she felt conflicted. I could sense the internal struggle in her voice, but I continued, not wanting to lose the moment. The camera was rolling, recording everything. "Toby, not here," she pleaded softly, glancing at the bed she shared with Josh. "Not in this bed." But I could tell she was already giving in. "Why not?" I asked, challenging her hesitation. "Josh already knows about us, so what's the difference?" She paused, her voice faltering. "This bed, it's supposed to be for me and Josh. It won't be the same." I could see her mind racing, torn between her thoughts and the situation. "And Luna is waiting," she added weakly, still grasping for a reason to resist, but her voice lacked conviction. You want to make her wait while you stay here with me? I asked, watching her expression shift. Kimberly hesitated, but her silence spoke volumes. We shouldn't, she whispered, her tone unsteady. But we're here anyway, I said softly, leaning closer. I could see her resolve fade. I moved her gently, guiding her closer to me, and though she didn't speak, I could feel her hesitation slipping away. She didn't resist as I led her into the moment, her breathing shallow and uncertain. As she leaned into me, there was a sense of inevitability in the air, and I knew she had given in. This is wrong, she murmured, but her words were faint, almost as if she was saying them for herself. Leaning closer, I whispered, But you're here. We were both caught up in the moment, the tension thick in the room. I could see it in her eyes. She was struggling with her emotions, but the decision had already been made. The camera continued to record, capturing everything as the moment unfolded. I positioned myself behind Kimberly, gently pulling her close as I wrapped my arms around her. The atmosphere was thick with tension and hesitation. As we moved, it was clear this was about something much deeper than the moment. But I tried to focus on the task at hand. Kimberly let out a quiet groan, her breath shaky as she adjusted to the situation. How are you feeling? I asked, wanting to gauge her response. It's a lot, she replied, her voice barely audible. She seemed torn, her mind racing between the lines she was crossing and the moment itself. Is this what you want? I asked, pushing gently for an answer. Kimberly stayed silent for a moment, her eyes closing as she tried to process everything. After a few seconds, she gave a slight nod, confirming what we both already knew. The sound of the bed creaking under the weight of the situation filled the room. I could tell she was trying to remain in control, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Suddenly she spoke again, her voice shaky. This doesn't mean anything, right? It's just a moment. Her words caught me off guard, but I understood where she was coming from. This was a line that once crossed would change everything. I paused, considering her words. What do you mean? I asked, knowing full well that things had already changed. Kimberly hesitated, her eyes flitting from the ceiling to me. We're just here, in the moment, right? Nothing else. I could sense the weight of her words, and I knew that this was her way of trying to keep everything in perspective. It was clear she needed reassurance that this would remain a secret, something that wouldn't carry over into her real life. I gave her a slow nod, understanding that for her, this was about maintaining control over something she had already lost a grip on. Yeah, I get it, I said quietly. But deep down, I knew things were far more complicated than either of us were willing to admit. I quickly gathered my things, avoiding the need for any more awkward conversations. This moment would remain between us, but its impact was undeniable. I nodded. Was she uncertain? Wondering? Just hanging out, I confirmed to reassure her, turning to the door. Nothing more, yet. See you later, Toby, Kimberly said, letting her words linger. I knew I would do anything to win Kimberly completely. Over the next 2 weeks, we would build on what we had started. I wanted her to forget about Josh, too. If she thought he ignored her, she'd start to see him disappear from her thoughts. I had many plans ready for the right time. Maybe she sensed it more than she wanted to admit. At least she seemed curious enough to seek reassurance. Soon after, I edited the recording, cutting it down to the most important parts. The part where she stood by the bed in her yoga pants, and especially the part where we were cuddling on the bed where she admitted I was better. I began to question whether it was wise to deal with Josh this way. He had set a boundary. But if he just realized how much time his wife wanted with me, I thought, why not? He had it coming. He needed to face the reality of her being with me instead of him. Maybe we'd even make a cozy space for him if we didn't ask him to leave. I hit send. No videos yet? Josh wrote. I was drying my hair after a quick shower. I had completely forgotten. Everything was happening so fast, and now I was heading out to play tennis with Luna. I had arranged this a week earlier to avoid Toby when I thought it was necessary, but now it was more about distracting myself from my feelings for Toby. Toby had recorded us before in our room, but I wasn't sure if he had sent it. I'll make some, I promise. G2G, I replied, heading down to finally play tennis with Luna. Where were you? Luna asked as I came down the stairs, annoyance clear in her voice. Had she seen Toby? Sorry, I had a little issue, I chuckled. What happened to your dress? Luna asked, pointing at my skirt. I looked down and saw an obvious stain on my hip. It was from Toby. I felt my face flush. How would I explain that? Yeah, I tried to clean it. Probably a mix of bleach and sweat, I laughed, trying to hide my embarrassment. Lesson learned. No more distractions with Toby when guests were around. Well, I want to enjoy the sun, so let's go play, Luna said, not really paying attention, but I couldn't help but wonder how much she had noticed. I had been pretty loud. I was worried, to say the least. I still was. I hadn't heard much from Kim in the past few days, and what I did hear didn't sound like her at all. I sensed something was wrong and just wanted to escape this quarantine and get home fast. I was really worried, completely unaware of what was happening outside my hotel room in the Alps. Then I got a message from Toby. I had almost forgotten about him, expecting his text to say goodbye since his stay was over. There was no reason to keep in touch. But that wasn't the case. He sent me a video taken from my nightstand that showed Toby with my wife in an intimate moment. I felt sick when I saw it. I heard her say things that made my stomach turn about how he was better. I wanted to scream and confront Kim. How could this have happened? I realized I had some blame in this. I had accepted a bit of casual fun, but this was too far. Having someone be with her in our bed without my knowledge or approval was beyond what I could accept. What worried me more was that it happened while I was far away. How could Kim have agreed to this? I went through a lot of feelings: sadness, jealousy, anger. If Toby had been in front of me when I first watched that video, I might have acted without thinking. I tried to call Kim, but it seemed like Toby had somehow blocked my number. After some time to think, I pieced together that he must have messed with my phone during our trip to Nebraska. It made sense given how she had been acting in her recent messages. It might not even have been her texting me. Maybe it was Toby messing with my head. I began to wonder how much Kim knew about all this. Did she know I was out of touch? Did it even matter? What was done, and there was no going back. Toby had been with my wife directly and had most likely done it more than once. How could he resist? If Kim was willing, any man would take that chance. Then came the messages. Toby seemed to enjoy taunting me. He sent several texts along with the video bragging about how Kim was into him, how they had been together multiple times in one day, and how she planned to sneak around behind my back even after I came home. Some messages were even harsher. He claimed he could get Kim pregnant. She wants me. She lets me be with her any time, Toby wrote. I stayed quiet, knowing that responding would only encourage him. But Toby kept sending messages. Kim doesn't mind me being intimate with her. It won't take long for me to get your wife pregnant, he continued. Not that she'll be your wife again. She'll do whatever I want her to. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. My hands were shaking and I felt dizzy. I was scared Toby was telling the truth. The idea that Kim was out there with him, making promises without me even knowing? It was too hard to take. What kind of lies had Toby told her? I don't think she will say no. Not if I say you were okay with it, Toby wrote next. So that was his trick? He made her think I was involved too. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it shifted the feeling a bit. I knew Kim well, and I knew she wouldn't act this way without thinking it was acceptable. Toby had deceived her, but Toby didn't stop. Later that night, he sent me a video. The camera showed Kim's focused face while she was with him. It looked like they were in our TV room, making it feel worse. What kind of man lets his wife do this? Toby said. The video seemed to start mid-conversation. Kim let out a small laugh. Come on now, Toby. The video shifted to later. I could hear Toby enjoying himself while the camera showed Kim engaged with him. Then the screen went dark, and I heard Kim gasp, followed by sounds that I didn't want to hear. I turned it off. I didn't want to see it, but part of me needed to see if Kim would resist. But there was nothing. Either Toby edited it out or she believed she was allowed to do this. Or maybe she was feeling too at ease with Toby. The idea was unbearable. Kim giving in to Toby's desires? A man who didn't care for her but just wanted to control her? I knew Kim was better than that. Big and successful with everything, yet I felt so powerless. My heart felt shattered. It was painful not just because of my own hurt, but also because I knew Kim was being misled. My wife. She wasn't just my wife. We were best friends for years. We had shared everything together. All of our memories felt tainted by Toby's actions. There was no way to erase it. What had happened was happening. I tried calling Luna, but there was no answer. I reached out to my uncle who was in town for work. I even tried to call Zach. Slowly, I realized my phone might have been disabled by Toby, so I was only able to communicate with his phone. That was the only explanation I could come up with. My only hope was a plan I had thought about earlier. I had tried calling Kim to discuss it before I realized my phone was not working. The rules had changed. I was coming home much earlier than Toby probably expected. After Luna left, I felt a little awkward. She didn't push any issues, nor did she hint that she knew anything. But she reminded me of Josh. They were quite different in looks and attitude, yet similar in some ways. Both were athletic, and Luna even taught me a thing or two about tennis. But she opened my eyes a bit. I had always enjoyed intimacy, but I wasn't very focused on it before Toby. I liked playing games and hanging out with friends, and then enjoyed some closeness with my husband whenever I needed it. So I felt somewhat relieved that this was only meant to be a temporary arrangement, even if Toby wanted to keep it going, even without Josh knowing. Still, we all knew Josh would want to put a stop to it. I could easily talk to Josh if needed, and he would take care of Toby without hesitation. I felt secure in that, especially since Josh had been trained in martial arts all his life, while Toby had just picked up some skills recently. Just looking at their builds, you could see the difference. One was tall and strong, while the other was shorter and built differently. In the end, I managed to get Toby to agree not to go too far with our intimacy. It wasn't easy, but we had to set some limits to keep things comfortable. Just thinking about what we were doing felt strange. I had never been with anyone else before, and this might be my only chance, as long as Josh was okay with it. However, I was planning to stop taking my pill soon to prepare for Josh, so I didn't want to take any chances. A sensible person might say I should just stop, but I thought this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once Josh returned, I knew things would change. I tried to let Toby know this was just something casual. I was having some fun outside of my marriage while Toby got to enjoy his time too. At least, that was how I saw it. One day, I found myself sitting in our lounge playing Mario Kart with Toby. I'm not the most focused on romance, despite what some might think. I enjoy my games and spending time with friends, so Toby reluctantly joined me. "Nintendo is for kids," he mumbled, sinking down beside me on the couch. "Come on, it's fun. I play all the time and I'm older than you," I replied, checking my phone. A few days had passed and I hadn't heard much from Josh. I wasn't sure if it was a reception issue, but usually he kept in touch. Lately, though, he hadn't been very responsive. He'd sent a few messages, but they were short, and even those had stopped coming. Maybe there was some bad weather in Torino. Even in the middle of summer, the higher areas might still get snow. "Yeah, whatever," Toby said, grabbing one of the controllers. "Luna will lighten up once she moves in," I teased, trying to shift the mood. Toby didn't respond, staring straight at the screen. He seemed uninterested in the conversation, just wanting to get through the gaming session. He was still in his usual dirty gray sweatpants, lounging next to me with a tired look. I glanced at him, then quickly focused back on the game. This was supposed to be a distraction, after all. We played for a while, but I kept checking my phone. Josh still hadn't responded to my last message, and it was starting to bother me. I had sent him a simple question about his day, but there was nothing from him yet. "You're not really focused," Toby muttered as my character fell off the track in the game. "I'm just worried about Josh," I admitted, looking over at him. Toby stayed quiet for a moment, still playing, before finally responding. "He'll be fine. Yeah, I know, but he's my husband. I just want to hear from him." "Maybe he's sleeping or something. If I were stuck with nothing to do, I'd probably sleep all day too," Toby said, shrugging. I nodded, trying to convince myself that Josh was just busy. Still, I missed that little bit of reassurance from him. Toby paused the game, placing the controller on the table. "If he's not giving you the attention you need, I can step in," he said casually, leaning back and glancing over at me. I smiled weakly. "Thanks." For some reason, I placed my hand on Toby's knee, not really thinking much about it. The game wasn't holding our attention, and I was feeling distracted anyway. I noticed Toby's gaze following my hand, and something about the moment felt different. "How much attention do you think I deserve?" I asked with a teasing tone. Toby smirked. "Josh shouldn't have left in the first place. If he's not going to be here for you, I will be. I gave a small nod. Maybe that's what I need right now, I said, glancing at him. But remember, no crossing the line. Toby chuckled. Don't worry, I know when to stop. I looked up at him and saw something change in his expression, like he was stepping into a new role, trying to be what I needed in that moment. There was an odd tension between us, and I wondered how things had ended up this way. As the room fell into silence, I knew we both were trying to figure out what to do next, but I also knew that this moment was one we couldn't take lightly. He had taken Josh's place for now, being my only partner until Josh returned. Toby was getting really good. I could feel him starting to find a nice rhythm that made me enjoy every moment. I liked imagining being on my couch, sharing a moment with him. Toby didn't say much. Instead, he pulled me into a kiss, and I felt him moving closer. I couldn't remember if we had been this close before, but I decided to just enjoy it, letting him take the lead. I quickly reached for him, feeling bold and excited. You're feeling this, Toby said lightly, moving a bit with me. Oh yes, I replied, enjoying the connection. I want you to be with me. Say it again, Toby responded, encouraged by my words. I want you, I whispered, feeling the moment deepen. Soon after, he helped me change positions, and I adjusted myself comfortably. He moved me to sit with my legs on either side of him. I could feel the closeness between us, and it made my heart race. The feeling was so intense, and I leaned back, taking in everything around me. You feel amazing, I told him, completely absorbed in the moment. Toby smiled. I can't believe anyone would miss out on this, he said, looking at me with admiration. It's not his fault. He's not here, I replied, feeling a mix of emotions. But I am, Toby said, and I knew I should just focus on enjoying this time together. We spent a long time like that, feeling connected and enjoying each other's presence. I leaned in closer to him, savoring the moment and kissing him. I felt his hands exploring my back, and it filled me with excitement. You're wonderful, Toby said softly. I can't understand how someone would ignore you. Just be with me, I replied, wanting to connect even more. I felt alive in this moment, enjoying the time we had together. I could sense my feelings rising, building up with each passing second. I looked down at Toby, gripping his hair, his harsh words echoing in my mind. They hurt, but I could tell he enjoyed the game of control, so I decided to play along. Is that what you think? I asked, keeping my voice steady. That I need someone else? Toby's response was quick and direct. You're married to a guy who isn't giving you what you need, who lets you do what you want, and now he's away, leaving you behind, he said, his tone firm. I clenched my fists, trying to push away the rising frustration. A small part of me agreed with Toby's words, even though I knew I shouldn't feel this way. I didn't like being left in the dark by Josh, and it fueled my actions, even if it didn't justify them. I hated that I was thinking like this, but right now, all I wanted was an escape from those emotions. Toby's hands gripped my waist, guiding me with steady pressure. The tension between us was building, and I could feel my frustration starting to melt away, replaced by a strange sense of relief. I let out a shaky breath, trying to keep control, but everything felt overwhelming. He met my eyes, challenging me. Show me you need this, he said softly. I didn't respond with words, just kept moving forward, trying to block out the conflict in my mind. My body moved on instinct as I tried to process everything. Time felt like it slowed, and my thoughts became more and more clouded. Suddenly, Toby shifted positions, pulling me around until I was on my knees, steadying me as he stayed close behind. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes, still trying to figure out how things had spiraled so far. You belong to me now, right? Toby's voice cut through the haze, firm and insistent. I couldn't answer right away, my mind racing. I had crossed a line, and while I couldn't undo it, I knew I needed to stop this from going any further. This isn't what I want, I whispered, shaking my head. Toby hesitated, and I turned around, the moment finally starting to break apart. The tension hung in the air as I looked at him, realizing that I needed to step away from this before it went any further. I quickly wrapped my hands around him, moving my hands up and down, hoping to make him feel good. Toby sighed and leaned back, letting go for a moment. Some of the mess landed on me, and I could feel it pooling on the sofa. "Wow," Toby said, looking down at me as he was still excited. "Just like before," I joked, reminding him of our past times together. Toby smiled at this, running his fingers through his messy hair. "Yeah," he replied softly. I grinned up at him, playfully touching a bit of the mess. "Look," I said, showing him my finger. "It's a bit messy," I added, tasting it. Toby smiled knowingly. "I'll give you something messy," he teased. "I can't wait," I replied sweetly, pulling him closer. We started kissing, and Toby gently pushed me back into the sofa. I felt the mess on my body, spreading a little on the cushions. We were lost in the moment, his lips meeting mine as he explored, but he carefully avoided touching anything he had left behind. I was a little worried about Josh, but Toby was being sweet to me. I liked being close to him. While I was enjoying our time together, I knew I wouldn't get too carried away. No matter what Toby thought, I wasn't going to let myself get too attached. I had been missing Josh, and maybe that made me more eager to be with Toby. Eventually, I pulled away to check my phone. "Ugh," I said. "Josh hasn't even replied yet. Should I call him?" I asked. "No, don't. The signal is terrible. Even if you could get through, it probably wouldn't work well," Toby replied urgently. "He's okay, just busy with something. Maybe he found a new game and is really into it. If nothing else, we'll keep him entertained with our videos. They seem to go through, right?" I looked at Toby. Maybe he was right. His words made me feel better. I hoped Josh was fine, maybe finding something to keep him busy, especially since he was a gamer too. Or maybe he's struggling with everything, letting his wife be with someone else while he's away. Maybe he's realizing how hard it is, Toby suggested. I didn't like that idea. Was Josh having doubts? After all, he had asked me to do this. I couldn't take any of it back now. Toby had been with me and he understood my feelings completely. Why would Josh doubt this if he was really interested? And until he gets back, I'll be here for you. Then we can talk about why he's not around, Toby said in a firm tone. I don't think he's ignoring me. I just think he's a bit distracted. I guess I'm a little sensitive. He can't change his situation. I just feel a bit overlooked, I replied. It'll be okay, Toby assured me, rolling over to lie next to me on the couch. You have me. If Josh is too busy, I'll pay attention to you. I smiled and rested my head against him. Thanks, again, I said softly. While his kindness was nice, Toby wasn't Josh. I cared for Josh more than anything. That was why I wanted his attention. I wanted him to show me he cared. Although Toby was trying to comfort me, I started to feel concerned for Josh. He was alone, facing something that might be difficult for him. Of course, Toby said, awkwardly running his hand through my hair. We stayed like that for a bit, with Toby gently touching my hair as we relaxed. I need to wash up, I finally said, getting off the couch. See you later? I didn't expect Kimberly to put on such a show when I mentioned stepping back from Josh. She kept talking about how he didn't respond and how he was ignoring her. I slowly began making a plan to A, bring him back into the picture in a small way, and B, to show Kimberly that she was important to me. But for that to work, I needed to find a way to address the first part. I noted that Kimberly needed some proof that Josh was still around. I had to pretend that Josh was excited about this next step. Everything was coming together, but there was just one issue. Thinking about challenges, but I knew I could make it work. It was two parts, and I had to handle both well. First, I needed to make sure Josh seemed sorry, but still wanted Kimberly to be involved with me. Maybe even more than before. This could definitely help with the idea that Josh was ignoring her. In the next part, I had to convince Kimberly that Josh wasn't really ignoring her. He was simply busy and might have forgotten. Forgot is a big deal since people hate feeling forgotten. I needed to create a small chance for redemption while also giving her a hint that he had indeed overlooked her. Just then, I finally got a message from Josh. I was sitting on my bed, drying my hair and getting ready to talk to him. I didn't worry too much about Josh not messaging for a while. It was nice to know he was okay. I went through our latest texts together, feeling glad that he was still there for me. Josh, sorry babe, I'm not mad or anything. Just needed some time to think. It's strange being stuck here. It's been a bit of a journey. Me. Aw, hon, I'm sorry you feel lonely. I wish you were home. Josh, it's fine. You're being so sweet. How's everything on your end? Me. Well, Toby is doing his part. Josh. Mm-hmm. How's he doing? Me. Great, he's gotten quite assertive, let's say. Josh. Oh, really? What has he done? Me. Just the usual. Josh. The usual? Me. Yep. Josh. I bet you're enjoying being with him. Me. Oh, yes, I am. Me. So we're good, right? Josh. Of course, hun. It's just strange for me being here. Me. You're not jealous or anything? Josh. Nope. Josh. Again, I'm sorry for not replying sooner. I got this new game console and I really got into it. I kind of lost track of time for a bit. Me. Losing track of me? I was teasing him, but I did feel a little annoyed. It was odd that he wasn't using many emojis. Josh usually loved to use them, so I guessed he was typing quickly and realized he hadn't been messaging like he usually did. Josh. No, not at all. Just distracted is all. Me. Oh, okay, it's fine. Me. So am I still allowed to hang out with Toby, right? Josh. Yes, of course, honey. I love the videos. Keep sending them. Me. Cool. Just please don't ignore me like that again. I can imagine how bored you must be. Josh. Heh, yes. You know me. Once I start playing, it's hard to pull me away. Me. Yeah, I get it. Well, I'm glad you're all right. Josh. Sure thing, hun. I closed my messages, feeling much better. He was okay, just distracted by his game, as Toby had said, and probably stressed about being stuck in a room. It still bothered me that he wasn't himself lately, but I would forgive him. Maybe I was being a bit silly. I didn't know how he was feeling being stuck in one place for so long. Quarantine can be tough. Still, it was great to know he was fine. I looked around my bedroom. I felt energized after chatting with Josh, and it was a nice feeling. Now I needed something to keep myself busy, and since Josh was preoccupied, I knew exactly what to do. I walked over to Toby's room, opened the door, and stepped inside. He was at his desk, turned away from me, focusing on some game he had told me about. When he heard me come in, he turned to look at me. Kimberly, he said, a playful smile on his face. What's up? I smiled back and walked closer. I'm good, but I was thinking, I haven't sent a video to Josh lately. Do you want to help me make something I can send? Toby smiled wider and nodded. Sure, he said. I just wanted to escape this quarantine. The hotel staff had been friendly before the lockdown, but during it, they were not useful at all. I tried many times to get help in reaching out to Home and to Kim, but either they didn't understand or didn't want to help. I found it frustrating as I paced my room. I was feeling anxious. I usually didn't pace, but I was tired of being stuck here. My thoughts flipped back and forth between the lockdown and Kim, who was with Toby. Deep down, I worried that he might take her away. I had seen the videos. He hasn't called yet? No response? Toby would say after spending time with her. No, Kim would reply. Toby had her thinking that I had stopped contacting her, which broke my heart. It made me angry to see her think so poorly of me. Maybe he can't handle you being with someone else, Toby would whisper to her. But why wouldn't he let me know? Kim's voice sounded hurt. It was hard to watch her suffer. Perhaps he has found someone else, Toby would suggest quietly. No, he wouldn't do that, Kim would protest. Toby would lie and create doubt in Kim's mind. He told little lies while treating her nicely, which changed how she viewed me bit by bit. While I had the hope of getting home soon, Toby was trying to take advantage of the time he thought he had. Once I found out what Toby was doing, I looked for my laptop, but my phone was broken. I soon realized I had left my laptop behind in Venezia because this was supposed to be a short trip. I spent too long trying to get the staff to send it to me, but had no luck. Next, I tried to create fake email accounts or social media accounts that I knew Kim used. This might have worked years ago, but now Kim had strict filters in place for her esports job. I kept trying, but I knew my efforts were going nowhere. It was the same with her other social accounts. She wouldn't accept messages from someone she didn't know. I attempted to reach her through my own account, but she had closed DMs for me on every service. Didn't she notice? Or was she too distracted? As I tried everything, the signal up here was weak, and everything moved slowly. It didn't help that I was having a hard time concentrating. The stress was overwhelming, clouding my thoughts with a heavy fog that made it nearly impossible to focus. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, hurt, and confusion were crashing into one another in my mind. For a while now, Toby had been working his way into Kim's life, trying to win her affection in subtle ways. He'd tell me how he'd make her breakfast, give her foot massages, and spend time whispering sweet words to her. It hurt me deeply. But what hurt even more was the strange reaction I had whenever I saw the videos of them together. I didn't like it. I hated seeing Kim with him, yet I kept watching, caught in a cycle of feeling anger and shame. After every viewing, I'd be filled with rage and despair, wondering why this was happening to the woman I loved. In rare moments of clarity, I tried reaching out to others in Cordington, hoping to talk to someone who could help. The bad internet and poor cell service made this a slow and frustrating process. Normal calls or texts didn't seem to work anymore, except with Toby. I resorted to using social media, but Luna wasn't responding. She hardly ever checked her messages. As a last resort, I thought of contacting Zach or Amanda. Then, the lockdown lifted. An Italian colleague of mine saw how stressed I was when we met in the hotel lobby. I quickly explained that something was wrong at home and that I needed to get back immediately. He let me borrow his phone, and I dialed Kim. Meanwhile, Toby had made himself comfortable, trying to deepen his connection with Kimberly. They spent time together, and the tension between them was palpable. But it wasn't something I could have expected. My absence left room for Toby to manipulate the situation, taking advantage of my time away. Though there was nothing I could do at the moment, I knew I had to get back as soon as possible to set things right. The moment had been filled with so much energy that I felt like my heart was going to burst. "That was incredible," she said, her voice soft and light. "Yeah, it really was," I replied. "I could go for more," she teased. "I doubt you can handle it," I joked. "Are you sure about that?" she asked, reaching toward me. "Kimberly, if you keep it up, I won't be able to hold back." "Good," she said, a playful smile on her face. She brushed against me, and I could feel a spark between us. Her touch was exciting, building up feelings inside me. She looked at me with longing in her eyes, and I could sense the connection growing stronger. "Wow, Kimberly, you're really good at this," I said, feeling overwhelmed. "Yep," she replied, smiling. "You better be careful, or it won't be long before I can't take it anymore." She pulled back slightly, leaving us both caught in that moment. "Then you should give it your all so we can enjoy it again," she said in a low, playful tone. I turned her gently, and we moved closer to each other. I felt the warmth between us as we shared this intimate moment. She gasped, and I could sense the excitement building. "Oh yes, just like that," she exclaimed. I could feel the tension rising as we shared this experience. "Tell me what you want," I said. "Oh yes, I belong to you," Kimberly replied breathlessly. "Are we going to do this again?" "Absolutely." "All right," I said, feeling the thrill. "I can feel it building again. Then let it happen." After a few more moments, we both reached that peak, and it felt like everything around us vanished. We fell onto the bed, caught up in the afterglow. "Wow," Kimberly said, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "That was incredible. Again?" "I told you it would be intense," I chuckled. "Don't get too confident," she said, playfully hitting my shoulder before getting up. "I'm off to take a shower." I nodded, watching her go. Just as she entered the bathroom, I heard a phone buzzing. I spotted Kimberly's phone on the nightstand vibrating with an incoming call. "Kimberly!" I called toward the shower. "You have a call!" "Who is it?" she shouted back, her voice muffled. I looked at the phone and saw it was an unfamiliar number. I suddenly felt a sense of unease wash over me. I had a feeling I knew who it might be. Had Josh managed to get another phone in his situation? I couldn't be sure, but I didn't want to take any chances. I'm not sure," I said, quickly hanging up the call. Whoever it was, they hung up. I went into my settings and blocked calls from unknown numbers. I also deleted the call from my log. Kimberly was smart and could change it back, but I hoped she wouldn't think to do that for a while. "Okay, thanks," her voice echoed from the bathroom. I blocked Josh on Discord and uninstalled it. I did the same for Facebook and Twitter. When I finished, I felt a wave of relief. I opened Instagram and saw a message from Luna asking if everything was okay. Had Josh reached out to her? I uninstalled Instagram too. I needed to do something about Kimberly's phone so she wouldn't get worried. I thought I could borrow her phone quickly to install a program that would stop her from getting calls or messages from anyone but me. It was a bit much, but it might work. As I was deep in thought, Kimberly came out of the bathroom. She had a towel wrapped around her and her hair was still wet. "So, what's the plan for today?" she asked with a smile. "Hey, how about a road trip? I thought maybe we could pretend to be a couple with a secret," I suggested, feeling a bit silly about the idea. "Really? Are you feeling adventurous?" Kimberly said with a mischievous look. "Not really. I thought pretending was kind of silly, but I wanted to get us out of the house in case Luna showed up or anyone else. Josh getting through had me on edge. I needed time away while I dealt with things. Yeah, come on, get dressed and let's go. We can't arrive at the same time," I said with a reassuring smile. Okay, she answered, digging into her closet. "Oh, and let's not book a place under our own names. It might look suspicious," I added. "Good idea," Kimberly said eagerly. "Should we film it for Josh?" "Yeah, that might be a good idea," I replied, slipping my phone into my pocket and getting dressed. "Try to find a nice spot that's at least an hour away, then text me the address." "All right, I'll find something casual to wear," she said. I didn't answer. I went downstairs with her phone, set it up, and placed it somewhere she would easily find it. It felt like a temporary fix, but I hoped it would give us some time away from home. Soon, I heard Kimberly downstairs putting her purse on the counter. "I'm ready to go. Remember to call an Uber so only one of our cars is out," Kimberly reminded me with a playful smile. "Good thinking," I said. Kimberly blew me a kiss as she walked out the door. I watched her walk to her car. Soon, the engine started and she drove away. I then went to the kitchen to grab my phone. It felt a bit early, but I needed to start the next steps of my plan. I was surprised by Toby's adventurous side, but here I was at a motel to pretend to be his unfaithful wife. I didn't see it as cheating since I had my husband's trust and permission. Still, I was troubled by how he had been distant lately. I knew the feelings of guilt might weigh on me, but Josh had insisted on going along with everything. This little getaway was a welcome distraction. Just then, while I was relaxing on the motel bed and scrolling through my phone, I got a text from Josh. "Hey, babe. Sorry I've been a bit out of it. Things have been tough here," he wrote. "Finally. I've missed you. Hope you're well." "I completely understand," I replied, happy to hear from my husband again. "Just glad you're okay. Sorry again. Just distracted. How are things with you and Toby?" Josh asked. I rolled my eyes at that. After days of silence, was this the first thing he wanted to know? And why did his messages feel so generic? It seemed like he was responding more out of duty than interest. I reminded myself that he was likely having a rough time being away. "He's okay. Can't wait until you're home, though," I replied, trying to keep things light. "Any news yet?" Josh texted back right away. His playful banter was familiar, and it made me smile. It was frustrating and amusing at the same time. After a moment, I replied, "You really want that, huh, you cheeky man?" I intended to brush it off, but part of my mind enjoyed the playful tone, too. Josh responded, "Doesn't hurt to try." I laughed at that and replied, "Certainly doesn't." So it seemed he didn't mind me spending time with Toby. That was good to know. I was relieved to see that he could joke about it. It was a one-time adventure, and I had thoughts about how Josh would react later, so I was pleased he was supportive. After that, I didn't get another message from him, so I started watching videos about building tree houses on YouTube, enjoying my interest in outdoor skills. Just then, my phone pinged again. "Are you going to do it?" he wrote, leaving out the details. I sighed, unsure if he was encouraging this or just teasing me to see if I would meet up with Toby again. I needed to put a stop to this before things got out of hand. This was all too overwhelming for me. "I can't do this. I'm not going off the pill, and even if I did, I'm not going to let him inside me like that," I texted, hoping that would end things. But it didn't. My phone chimed again. "So you're okay without protection then? I heard it's supposed to be better." That felt like a really silly argument. I quickly replied, "Not funny." I let out a small sigh. Josh was really pushing me into a corner, and I was just waiting for my boyfriend. The timing of Josh's messages was either perfect or awful, depending on how you looked at it. "I'm serious," he texted back. My heart raced. I felt a strange fire inside as I read his reply again. I couldn't believe he was so serious about this. Was he joking around? But why would he joke about something like this, especially since he knew what had been happening between Toby and me? "You're being dumb," I finally replied, my hands shaking a little. I wanted him to be joking, but part of me was curious too. The idea of being so close to Toby in that way, it felt wild and risky. I'm serious. He's already gone that far with you. And you're okay with that? And off the pill? It might feel good. Wow, Josh was really pushing this hard. What's the harm in letting him finish with you? I know you like him. It must feel nice to be that close. So which is it then? Is he finishing with me or am I off the pill? I teased back. Josh had to know it was one or the other. Why not both? He texted. You're joking, I replied. I knew he was just trying to get a reaction out of me and would never actually suggest that. Aren't we rushing things a bit? What's the fun in being too careful? Don't make me think about it, Josh, I replied, trying to sound firm, though I wondered if he saw through it. There was no way I was going to let this happen, so I decided to call his bluff. I'll stop taking the pills in 15 minutes unless you say something. Then I'll find Toby and see where things go. That should put an end to it. I set a timer and tried to go back to scrolling through my phone, but I couldn't focus. I kept looking at the timer and checking for a reply. No message came from Josh, so I waited a bit longer. Finally, I texted him, "Well, I'm waiting." Still no reply from Josh. After 5 more minutes, I got up. I forgot to take my pill today, so by tomorrow or the next day, things could get risky. Was Josh really okay with this? Was I? Would I really let Toby be this close to me? It seemed unlikely that Toby would stop if things got serious. I had heard stories like this before, and part of me wanted to see what might happen. The idea of doing something thrilling with someone I knew could lead to trouble felt both exciting and a bit frightening. Plus, it felt like Josh wanted this too. I was nervous, but also a little excited about meeting Toby, even if one of the possibilities was getting pregnant. That thought lingered in the back of my mind. I walked to the motel bathroom where my pills were stored. Microgynon. They were small, but very important. Should I really get rid of them? My hand shook slightly as I held the bottle. Was I brave enough to make this choice? If Josh was so eager, I wondered if it would be that bad. This could be an adventure with a partner and with my husband's support, and it would feel more real than just a scare. We planned to try for a baby soon anyway, so I was going to stop taking them eventually. But I stopped myself. Not yet. One of us needed to be sensible. I didn't want this to be a decision pushed by Josh through texts, especially while he was distracted. We needed to talk about serious things with clear heads. So I put the pills back in my bag, unsure about what to do next. I started pacing in my hotel room, feeling impatient to reach Kim or anyone else. The time zone differences made it hard to connect. I had called Kim several times, but I couldn't get through. Once I landed in New York, I finally got a call through, but it was dropped. What the heck? I said to myself, frustrated as I hurried to the gate. Then my phone buzzed. I saw the name Toby on the screen. I was surprised and worried. What did he want? I felt uneasy thinking about him possibly getting too involved. But I picked up the phone anyway. Maybe I could learn something about his intentions. "Hello, Toby," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Well, if it isn't good old Josh, how is Italy treating you?" He replied with a chuckle. "Why do you want to know?" I tried to keep calm. He didn't seem to know I was back in the US, so I had an upper hand. "What's this call about?" "It surprised me," I said through clenched teeth. "I just wanted to tell you that you've hit a dead end." Toby laughed on the other end. "Stop reaching out to Kimberly or anyone else. You need to step back and let her come to me." "No way," I replied angrily, feeling my irritation flare up for a moment. I stepped away from the small group near the gate, even though there weren't many people around. "You think you can just walk away?" Toby shot back, his voice serious now. "Don't make me share those videos I have of your wife. I'll show everyone how she's been unfaithful to you. It will be quite the story." "You wouldn't dare," I said, my jaw tight. "Just watch me," Toby replied. I wanted to fight back, but I held my tongue. He sounded sure of himself, and maybe he had a reason to be. "She's going to forget about you and choose me. There's nothing you can do. You've been absent, and I'm ready to step in and make her happy." "Enough, Toby. The truth always comes out," I replied, determined. Panic washed over me like a heavy weight. I knew he had the advantage. He really had those videos, and I was afraid he might actually post them. He had the power over my wife, and it felt terrible. But I had something too, something he didn't know about. His advantage might not last. I hardly wanted to come up with a clever reply. If he posted the videos, Kim's life would be ruined, and mine would be too. It wasn't just about embarrassment. It could destroy our families and our business. We wouldn't be able to recover. Stay away from my wife, I said coldly, grasping at control. I don't think so, Josh. She's with me now. Don't embarrass yourself more than you already have, Toby replied, his voice dripping with arrogance. He clearly enjoyed having the upper hand. I make her happy in ways you can't. I won't let you. You really have no say, Josh. Don't reach out to her or to me. Just let go and let me be with her. Better yet, forget she exists, he said, sounding pleased with himself. Then he ended the call. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. I realized too late how serious the situation had become. He had taken Kim's heart and was now taunting me. My phone screen froze and wouldn't respond. Gate 7 for flight 855, announced the speaker, pulling me from my thoughts. Please prepare to board. Great, I muttered as I noticed the time. That was my flight, and I still needed to check in. Why was I just standing here, feeling powerless? I walked toward the gate, ready to use my last option. I hadn't wanted it to go this far, and I felt the fear about losing Kim creeping back in. I was scared she preferred him over me. I hoped that telling the truth and presenting the evidence would be enough. It was hard to know what Kim was really thinking, as I only had brief glimpses through messages and videos. But once the reality of the situation was clear, Toby's little game would end. What's going on? Toby asked, slightly flustered as he walked into the room. I was already sitting on the bed, waiting for him in a casual outfit, nothing fancy. The small motel room was tucked away on the second floor, out of view from the main parking lot. He stepped inside and immediately noticed me, his eyes quickly scanning the room before settling on me. I got a text from Josh, I said, keeping my tone light. Oh yeah, Toby replied, trying to compose himself. I nodded. Yeah, apparently he thinks we should talk about things. Toby raised an eyebrow, slightly intrigued but cautious. He does? Yeah. So what do you think? Is there something you want to share? I asked, trying to keep things straightforward. Toby's gaze shifted as he considered his response. He wasn't one for long discussions, but I could see he was thinking through his next move carefully. You know my answer, he finally said simply. I could feel the tension in the room, and I was trying to manage the situation. This moment felt like a turning point, one where we needed to talk honestly about everything that had happened. Toby seemed confident, but I wasn't sure where this was headed. I'm ready to move on, Toby, I said softly, trying to steer the conversation toward resolution. We both know this situation can't continue like this. Toby looked at me, and for a moment, the usual dynamic between us seemed to shift. We had reached a point where the decisions we made would define what happened next. Without saying much more, he stepped closer, but I held my ground, determined to keep the conversation on track. This wasn't about playing any more games, it was about finding closure. It's just me and you, Toby, I said, watching his reaction as his confidence seemed to grow. He clearly enjoyed the feeling of being in control, but I needed to take back some of that power, even if it was just for a moment. All right, here's what's going to happen. We're going to do this my way. No more games, no more pretending, just the truth. Understand? I kept my voice steady, knowing we both had reached a point where honesty was the only path forward. He nodded, seemingly caught off guard by the shift in tone. It wasn't the response he had expected, but it was the one he needed to hear. Good, I said, feeling a sense of relief. There was no need for unnecessary drama or pushing boundaries any further. The tension between us was real, but it was time to address it without the layers of deception that had clouded everything before. We're both responsible for how we got here, I continued. But this ends now. It's not about control or proving anything anymore. It's about moving forward. Toby seemed to understand, his usual arrogance fading slightly as the weight of the situation settled in. Let's figure this out, I said, standing up and breaking the momentary silence. And let's make sure we don't repeat these mistakes again. Without needing to say more, we both knew the situation had reached its conclusion. It was time to step away from the past and focus on what really mattered, moving on with a clearer understanding of the choices we had made. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with tension as Toby entered, his expression shifting as he noticed me sitting quietly on the bed. I needed to be honest, to bring everything into the open, but it wasn't easy. I got a message from Josh, I said, breaking the silence. Toby paused, studying me before responding. "Oh yeah? What did he say?" "He thinks we need to have a conversation," I replied, keeping my voice calm. Toby's eyebrows furrowed as he processed my words. "What kind of conversation?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. "About everything that's happened, about where this is going." For a moment, the room was still. Toby took a step closer, but I raised my hand to stop him. "We can't keep going down this path," I said softly. "It's not right, and we both know it." Toby's usual confidence wavered as he stood there listening. I could tell he wasn't expecting this conversation, but it was one that had to happen. "I get it," he finally said. "You're right." The moment hung in the air as we both acknowledged the truth. It wasn't about power or control anymore. It was about finding a way forward, one that didn't involve more hurt or confusion. "We need to be better than this," I added, standing up from the bed. "Let's end this the right way." Toby nodded, and with that, the weight began to lift. We were finally on the same page, ready to move past the mistakes and leave this chapter behind. Without another word, we walked out, both knowing that this was the closure we needed. I want everything to feel just right. I noticed Toby grab his phone, and as he promised, he aimed the camera at me and started recording. He let it run for a bit before he spoke. "What did we just do?" Toby asked. I paused for a moment. Did I really want to say it on camera? But I thought, why not? We were now starting our role play, even though I had already caught some moments for myself. Maybe we could combine the clips later for a nice video with different views. "We just had a great time together," I said. "Do you enjoy sneaking around with me?" he asked. I didn't think of it as sneaking around, but I definitely liked being with Toby. So I answered, "Yes." "Did we just come to a motel so we could be together instead of with your husband?" Toby asked. "Yes." "Are you going to be good and take care of me now?" he asked playfully. "Yes, of course." "Great. Now help me relax a little. I have to deal with a wife who went behind her husband's back," Toby teased, making me smile as I did what he asked. And that was just the beginning. Over the next day, Toby and I would spend a lot of time together, enjoying each other's company in the motel. We were everywhere, on the carpet, in the shower, in our bed. It was incredible how good it felt to be close to him. Toby had a strong presence, and it was easy to get lost in the moment. Toby sometimes mentioned my husband, Josh, but I tried to change the subject. Occasionally, I would say something just to get Toby excited, especially when the camera was on. Toby seemed to really enjoy it, and I was caught up in the fun. There was a certain thrill in what we were doing. I was supposed to be faithful to my husband, yet here I was with someone who shouldn't be in my life according to the usual rules. I cared for Josh, but I could not deny how much I enjoyed my time with Toby. But eventually, we had to go home the next day. My phone was acting up, and I probably needed to get a new one. "It's probably just a little update," Toby said as I drove us home. "I could take a look if you want." "No, it's been acting strange for a while. Now it's really frustrating. I might just get a new one," I replied with a chuckle. It felt like everything was closing in. Josh was trying to reach me, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he found a way to get in touch with me. I wanted to make my time count, just like I did in the motel. She seemed content, not realizing how easily she had fallen under my influence. With each passing day, my plan felt closer to success. By my estimation, Josh still had time before he returned. If I could keep Kimberly occupied and away from any means of contacting him, things would stay on track. It was a delicate balance, like defusing a bomb, one wrong move, and everything would collapse. I couldn't help but be surprised by how much Kimberly was willing to overlook. She never suspected anything unusual. Maybe she preferred to believe everything was fine rather than digging deeper. Without Josh around to guide her, she was free to follow her own desires. It seemed like I was winning her over without Josh being able to stop it. The thought of taking what was most precious to him while he was powerless gave me a sense of satisfaction. The walls may have been closing in, but I was confident. The final phase was already in motion. If there had been any damage done to their relationship, it would only grow in the next few days. I had no intention of letting Kimberly hear from Josh. The more distance between them, the easier it would be to pull her in completely. In today's world, it's strange how reliant we are on our phones. Or maybe it's not strange at all, it just shows how lost we feel without them. I couldn't even flag down a ride when I needed one. The few drivers I found didn't seem eager to take me. Eventually, one guy gave me a lift to a nearby rental place. I paid him more than I should have, but I was desperate. Luckily, I knew the guy who ran the rental place, and my credit card still worked. I probably could have been more careful, but I was in a rush. As soon as I got the car, I sped off, easily doubling the speed limit. I hadn't even made it out of Indianapolis before I got pulled over. The officer took one look at me and decided to throw me in jail overnight, just because he could. From the moment I rolled down the window, I knew I was in for trouble. The bored look on his face was a clear sign. I spent the night pacing the cell, doing push-ups, and making a general nuisance of myself. But I didn't care. I was filled with frustration, and if anyone wanted to take it out on me, I was more than ready. The next morning, I picked up my stuff and immediately checked my phone. The first thing I saw was a message from Toby. "Enjoy Italy. I'll enjoy your wife." The phone was working again, which made me wonder if Toby had been controlling it the whole time, playing some sick game. Then I saw the pictures. A gallery of photos from Toby, all taken at the same angle. He must have set a timer on his phone, carefully planning each shot. He likely took multiple pictures and picked the ones that would embarrass me the most. The first few showed them sitting in the lounge area, each with a game controller. Kim seemed to be enjoying herself, while Toby looked more focused. Then in one photo, Toby turned and said something to her. The next image shifted dramatically. Kim was now on her knees, her head in Toby's lap. A few more pictures followed, showing the progression from Kim looking up at him to something more personal. In one of them, she was looking at the camera with an expression of satisfaction. As the pictures continued, Toby's intention to humiliate me became clear. Kim's face was covered, yet she seemed unfazed. She smiled faintly, completely unaware of how the whole situation would affect me. The final few pictures captured her in a different moment. One showed her with a satisfied look, and the next had her holding her mouth open, signaling she was completely in on what was happening. Seeing her like this, knowing the betrayal behind it, felt like a punch to the gut. I knew I shouldn't, but I opened the video Toby had sent as well, needing to understand the extent of the situation, no matter how much it hurt. The video was taken from a nightstand, capturing a moment between them. Toby was close to her, speaking softly. The angle didn't allow me to see much, but the sounds and movements made it clear. He asked her something about me, timing it perfectly to rub it in. "You haven't heard from him yet?" Toby asked quietly. "No, I'm starting to wonder if he's having second thoughts again," Kim responded with a hint of concern. Toby's expression didn't change as he continued to control the situation. They exchanged quiet words, and for her, it seemed like everything else was fading away. Toby asked if she had any doubts, but her answer was clear. "Not right now," she whispered. The whole thing was a mess. The quiet moments, the questions, and her responses were painful to hear. The betrayal felt more real with each passing second. Every word, every action reinforced the realization that I had lost control, and Toby knew exactly how to take advantage of that. Toby stopped, and I could hear Kim's annoyed sighs. Toby turned her over and started moving with her from behind. Kim was making soft sounds, pushing back against him as if urging him to go faster. I was breathing heavily, feeling a mix of rage and confusion. Hearing her call out his name and express pleasure hurt me deeply. In the video, I saw her face tilted upwards, smiling and panting with her eyes closed. She seemed to be enjoying everything, and I felt powerless to change it. Toby had skillfully led her into this situation. "You're really going for it," Kim gasped, matching Toby's rhythm. When the video ended, I needed to sit down. I was shaking with anger and pain, ready to break my phone. I couldn't accept what I had seen, despite the evidence. "Mission accomplished. See you next week," was the only thing Toby wrote. His confidence was infuriating. I was in a rental car after spending a night in jail. I was stalled, but not defeated. The trip to Cordington should take about an hour for anyone thinking clearly. But my mind was racing, pushing my speed despite already being caught once. I knew I couldn't change what had happened, but I wanted to get there quickly. I needed to tell Kim what was really happening. She had to see that Toby's intentions were to take her from me. When I arrived at our mansion, I waited as the gate opened. A moment later, I slammed on the brakes in front of the door and rushed inside. I paused to listen for any sounds. Silence. I walked into the kitchen, which was a mess with dishes everywhere, but there was no sign of Kim or Toby. I hurried upstairs, checking every room and finding no one. I looked in the office, the guest rooms, and our bedroom. The sight of the messy sheets on our bed filled my mind with painful thoughts of what had happened there. It felt like I could hear echoes of Kim's cries filling the space. It shouldn't have surprised me. I remembered the earlier events on the couch and everything that had led up to this moment. It was clear Kim had been interested and only my presence had held her back. With the added pressure of her needing a green card, she might have been more easily convinced by Toby. As I stood by the pool, staring blankly at the water, I heard the front door creak. I turned to see Kim walking up the stairs while Toby headed towards the kitchen. He looked the same, maybe just a bit worn out. I slowly approached the door and saw Toby finding 2 wine glasses and a bottle of nice red wine. It was clear that he didn't deserve such good taste. As he turned to head to the bedroom where Kim was, he spotted me. I stood there, tall and angry, knowing what he had done. I had never seen someone go pale so quickly. The sound of glass breaking interrupted the quiet as Toby dropped what he was holding. "Hey there, Toby," I said coldly. My heart raced as the tension grew. "I know what you're thinking," Toby began, but fear was evident in his voice. Whatever plan he had didn't include me standing there. I took a step toward him and he looked even more frightened. I could see he realized the mess he was in. I took another step, forcing him to back up into the kitchen. He raised his hands defensively. "Wait, you don't want to do this?" Toby said, trying to keep his voice down. "Do I not?" I laughed lightly, moving to block his escape. "You have it all on video," he stuttered. I paused. Of course he had. He had sent it to me himself. But it didn't matter now. "Don't you think I already know?" I replied through clenched teeth. "I set it up so it gets sent to everyone if I don't log in," he continued, inching away from me toward the fridge. Anger surged through me and I slapped him hard, sending him stumbling. "Deactivate it," I said firmly. "I mean it." "I refuse," he said, his voice shaky. I grabbed him by the collar, ready to react. "Don't hit me again," he warned. I hesitated for a moment, knowing he was panicking. He continued, "Think about what it will mean for you, your job, for Kimberly." He was right, and I felt my resolve waver. "Deactivate it," I told him again, trying to keep my voice calm. I could feel my chance at revenge slipping away. He scoffed. "Why should I?" He was regaining some confidence and tried to turn the situation in his favor again. "Just don't share the videos," I said, not sounding very convincing. I couldn't risk everything being public. I doubted his threat, but how much could I trust that? He had no way of knowing I would show up so soon, so maybe he was just trying to scare me. "Toby?" Kim called from the top of the stairs. "You coming?" Toby glanced at me, relief hitting him since Kim hadn't seen me yet. As much as I didn't like it, he was right. Toby knew he had control of the situation, at least for now. "Get out," he said firmly. "I'll handle things tonight. You can come back tomorrow, say you were early or something, but for now, leave before she sees you." "You really going to—" "I'll do what I want because I can take what you thought was yours," Toby interrupted, stepping closer, his anger evident. Meanwhile, I stood there, tense and angry, fists clenched, unable to stop him. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to unfold. Toby turned his head slightly and called out, "Coming, Kim. Just spilled some wine." He nodded toward the broken bottle and glasses. "Clean that up on your way out." Without another word, Toby turned and headed upstairs. I stood there seething with anger, disappointed in myself for being in this situation. I grabbed a broom and some towels to clean up the mess, but my focus was shattered by the sound of the headboard banging against the wall above me. Kim's voice, full of pleasure, echoed through the ceiling. Each sound from above was like a dagger. Kim's reactions told the whole story. She was clearly enjoying herself, her voice getting louder with each moment. My frustration grew as I heard them, the whole situation spinning out of control. Toby had somehow managed to flip everything around, and now I was stuck, powerless to change the course. After a while, I decided I couldn't let things continue like this. I had to figure out what Toby's threats really meant. Was that send to all message a bluff? I couldn't trust a word he said, but I wasn't without my own skills. Instead of leaving as he'd commanded, I slipped into the annex, locking the door behind me. The situation upstairs didn't slow down. Toby knew I was still in the house, and it seemed to feed his ego. The louder Kim got, the more intense his movements became, and it was clear they were both lost in their moment. Kimberly's voice filled the air, and with every sound, I felt the power dynamic shift further. Toby seemed to enjoy knowing I was nearby, maybe even assuming I could hear everything. It only fueled his sense of dominance. Kimberly was fully into it, her voice pleading for more, her satisfaction impossible to ignore. Whatever Toby was doing, I had no idea, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. Whether I was meant to hear it or not, the reality was clear I had lost control, and now I had to find a way to deal with the mess. Kim groaned as I pulled her closer. Her soft, barely audible moans made her desires clear. I gave her what she wanted, letting her take control as she moved in sync with me. "You want more, don't you?" I teased, knowing her answer already. Kim pushed back harder, her voice a low whisper. "Yeah. You don't care what Josh would think?" I challenged. "He's ignoring me," she muttered. "This is what he gets." It was clear she had made her choice. I had played my cards right, and now she was all mine. "And you like this, don't you?" I continued, as if solidifying what we both knew. "Don't worry. We'll keep this going until there's nothing left for Josh." Her response came as she gasped, a mix of emotions in her voice. "Call me Kim," she demanded, a name that Josh had always used. I obliged, saying her name, and could feel her reaction, as if that name held power. "Kim," I repeated softly, fully knowing what that meant for her. She was mine now. With that, she trembled, and I knew she had reached her breaking point. "Come on, Kim," I whispered in her ear. She shook, her body responding to the moment, and she let go completely. If Josh was still around, he would have heard everything. He would have realized his place in this twisted scenario left on the sidelines as Kim chose another. I had convinced him of things that weren't even true, but it worked. He believed the lies, just like Kim did. "Please," she whispered. "I need more." For now, that was all I needed to hear. I gave her what she asked for and watched as she quietly drifted into her thoughts. Even after everything, I knew she still thought of Josh. But at that moment, it didn't matter. She had made her choice. "That was good," I said, pulling away and resting beside her, feeling the weight of it all finally lift. "Yeah," she sighed, exhausted but content. She lay still, catching her breath, her mind likely spinning with thoughts about what had just happened. Even in this quiet aftermath, I knew there was still a part of her that couldn't let go of Josh. But for now, she was mine, lost in her own world of mixed emotions and decisions yet to come. I was unsure if she spoke that way because she really felt it or just to get a reaction from me. Either way, it showed her vulnerability, and I didn't mind that at all. Still, one of those choices revealed her true feelings. Maybe I wasn't as good at understanding her as I thought. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, pretending to care. "Just Josh. I feel bad for saying those things, and I keep wondering why he hasn't replied. He even unfollowed me on Instagram," Kimberly said, sounding defeated. It was hard not to feel for her, but her sadness played into my plan, and I couldn't help but feel a bit victorious. My husband. Maybe I made a mistake. "What mistake?" I asked. "You," Kimberly whispered, sounding sad. I lay back and thought for a moment. Of course she would feel that way. I needed to find the right words to change her mind about me and our situation. I wanted her to see it differently, not as a mistake, but as an opportunity. Meanwhile, the upset man was downstairs, and I had him fooled long enough to get closer to her. The same woman leaning against me, resting her head on my shoulder. I wanted to say something clever to push her further from her husband. "I think it's really unfair," I said. Kimberly lifted her head to look at me, thinking she had upset me. Good, that made her more open, but I had more to say. "To you, I mean. He lets you be with me but can't handle the truth. Instead, he cuts you off and treats you badly. I think that's a terrible thing." Kimberly sat up, looking a bit shocked at my honesty. "No, it's my fault. I must have ruined everything," she murmured. "I think you need better treatment than that," I continued. "In the big picture, how can he really care for you if he allows you to turn to someone else for comfort? What kind of husband lets his wife feel unwanted? A relationship should be special, and if it stops being just between you two, is it still a real relationship? Maybe Josh feels that way too, which is why he's ignoring you now. I gently stroked her back, like I had seen her husband do long ago to show care. I decided to be even more straightforward. If I were in his place, I wouldn't treat you how Josh has. I wouldn't let anyone else come between us, I finished. I looked directly into Kimberly's eyes as I spoke, and she smiled, though a little shyly. I suppose her smile could be understood in different ways. We can just see how it goes, Kimberly said softly, glancing away for a moment. I had planted a small idea. Now, let's see if it could grow. Like many who are overconfident, Toby didn't even bother to set a password for his computer. Maybe he thought no one would enter his room, or perhaps he just wasn't as clever as he believed. But I realized Toby wasn't truly foolish. Still, when I sat down at his desk, it was easy to find his collection of pictures of Kim. It made me uncomfortable to see how many he had. Images of her working on her computer, candid shots of her in swimwear, or relaxing on the couch filled his folders. In many of these photos, she was just sitting there, being my lovely wife. She looked so beautiful. It angered me to see what Toby had done, and looking at Kim, even in these unsettling pictures, reminded me of how much I loved her. As I continued to scroll, I began to understand the extent of his inappropriate behavior. He even had pictures of my sister Luna. That infuriated me. I had to control my anger. I marked the folders with Kim's and Luna's photos and deleted them. I emptied the trash. Then I found a folder labeled Private. I knew what that meant. It might contain photos of Kim while she was asleep or in the shower, and there were some where she appeared to be posing. Some had captions suggesting she did it for my benefit. I fought to keep my anger in check and deleted all of them. I knew he might have more hidden elsewhere, but I would deal with that later. Next, I came to the video folder. I saved that for almost last. I was unsure if I should delete these, despite how wrong that seems. But these videos could serve as strong proof. I hadn't spoken to Kim since all of this started, and while we had parted on friendly terms, I knew Toby could manipulate her. I needed to ensure she was safe. Some videos looked like they could have been taken without her permission, which could involve the police. I trusted Kim and knew she was my soulmate, but I had to be cautious about Toby. While I sat there, I made a decision. I decided to send the videos to myself. For some reason, Toby hadn't removed me from Discord, so I sent the files over. Since he had a special account, it was easy to share them. I downloaded the files onto my phone and deleted them from the inbox and from his computer. One by one, I erased the files, ensuring that nothing remained. But I hesitated over the last video. I didn't know why, but something made me click on it. Maybe it was curiosity, even though I knew it would only upset me. The video showed Toby sitting on our couch in the lounge. The familiar view of the night sky and the pool behind him made it clear the camera was placed nearby. I had seen this video before. Nothing unusual, but knowing the reality behind their closeness, I couldn't help but watch. In the video, I saw them together and it stung. Kim's expression, her voice, everything about it felt wrong, even though Toby always claimed he was taking her from me. I knew there was no love in that video, none that I could recognize. But the scene, as much as it angered me, also stirred something I didn't want to admit. I deleted it. I deactivated Toby's account, removed anything connected to him, and began wiping his computer. Maybe it was overkill, but my thoughts were scattered. Now I had to get to his phone to ensure everything was gone, especially anything stored in the cloud. The problem? His phone was likely upstairs with him next to Kim. I wasn't ready to face them, not yet. I needed to be sure I had control before confronting them. I was afraid that if I didn't, they might say something to throw me off. I stepped into the hallway, listening. It was quiet upstairs. Maybe they were asleep. I could sneak in, find the phone, and leave without them noticing. Or a part of me wanted to go in and confront Toby, take his phone by force. No, I needed to stick to the plan. Toby had shown me how far careful planning could take you. I crept up the stairs, moving carefully down the hallway toward our bedroom. The house was still, but as I got closer, I thought I heard soft sounds, faint shuffling, maybe even quiet whispers. But the door was closed. I wasn't sure if I could open it without alerting them. A part of me didn't want to listen to what was happening behind that door, but another part of me was drawn to it. As strange as it seemed, hearing Kim give in to someone else fueled a mix of emotions. I wanted to show her who her real husband was, to remind her of the bond we shared. But knowing it was Toby with her, in my place, only deepened the conflict inside me. The sounds coming through the door made it clear what was happening inside, and I hesitated for a moment. Just as I was about to open the door, a wave of guilt hit me. What was I doing? I had come here with a clear goal, but now it felt like I was losing focus. Was I really going to spy on my wife and this man? Was I sinking to this level? I was here to fix things, but my mind was spinning with confusion. No, I was here for the phone. Once I had that, I could end this. It would all be over for Toby. I just needed to get his phone, and then I could put an end to everything. I took a deep breath and cracked the door open. Inside, I could make out the shapes of the two of them in bed. The sound of the blankets moving and the soft sounds they made together made my heart sink. Toby was behind Kim, close to her, and it was clear what was happening. Each movement of the bed, each soft moan from her, felt like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen, watching in disbelief. They were wrapped in each other, moving slowly, almost tenderly in my own bed. The soft whispers and quiet gasps filled the room. I felt anger boiling up inside me, but I couldn't move. They had already been together once tonight, and here they were again. "Does the naughty girl want more?" Toby whispered to her. Kim nodded softly, pushing back against him with a quiet, "Uh-huh." I watched as he kissed her hair, holding her close as they continued. The sight of it was unbearable. This was the first time I had seen her in 2 weeks, and this was how I found her. Her back arched slightly, and she let out a familiar sound, a sound that used to be for me. They were completely wrapped up in each other, and I could see how this had all gone so far. His movements slowed, and then everything stopped. Their breaths were heavy, satisfied as they lay still. I had seen enough. I grabbed his phone from the nightstand and shoved it into my pocket. Then, without thinking, I reached for Toby and yanked him out of bed by his hair. He yelled in pain and surprise as I dragged him onto the floor. He went from feeling victorious to helpless in an instant. Kim screamed too, confused and scared. She probably thought I was someone breaking in, but soon everything would be clear. Toby struggled as I pulled him out of bed, but this time he had nothing left to hide behind. He got to his feet, struggling because he was heavier than I expected. That was good. I wanted him standing. "What on earth?" Toby shouted, swinging his arms at me, likely acting only out of instinct. I held his wrist tightly and pulled his arm behind his back. I leaned in close and said, "Checkmate. I deleted everything and I took your phone." The surprise on Toby's face was clear. He thought his threats would scare me, but I wasn't afraid. His overconfidence would be his downfall. "What is happening?" Kim asked, rushing out of the room and turning on the lights. "Josh? This guy has been playing games," I sighed, trying to keep Toby still. "Why are you doing this?" Kim asked, looking worried. It hit me. From her point of view, it seemed I had agreed to this and then suddenly changed my mind. I could see in her eyes that her loyalties were shifting because she didn't know everything yet. This realization fueled my anger and urgency. How close were we to a breaking point? "He lied!" I yelled. "He tricked me. He blocked my phone and made an app to send messages pretending to be me." "What? That sounds hard to believe," Kim replied, clearly uncertain but starting to think about the implications. "But that's not true. I was texting you and then you stopped responding." "No. 2. I struggled to find the right words. I pulled out my phone and handed it to Kim. "Look at our messages from the past week and check what he sent me too." To my surprise, Kim hesitated to take the phone. She seemed unsure how to process everything. She looked at the phone, trying to figure it out. "Why didn't you contact me any other way? Discord, borrow a phone, anything?" Kim asked. That made sense. Why hadn't I? There were so many silly reasons, but I couldn't explain them clearly. It's hard to explain. It's complicated. The pandemic happened, and the hotel wouldn't help. Toby blocked me on social media, I said quickly, but I could see Kim was still confused. Or maybe he didn't like seeing his wife with someone else, Toby chimed in. He's struggling with his feelings. "Be quiet, Toby," Kim snapped at him. Toby seemed to notice Kim's uncertainty and my struggle to calm her down. He tried to stay calm himself. Kim looked at him, then back at me. "I'm telling you, he's not to be trusted." He blocked my phone and sent me all kinds of mean messages. "Check my phone," I insisted. Kim looked at my phone but seemed unsure at first. After a few moments that felt like an eternity, she finally took it. Kim, wrapping herself in a robe, sat on the bed and started scrolling through the messages. Her eyes widened with shock as she realized there were hardly any messages between us. I could see her lips tremble as she read how Toby had teased me cruelly. The things he had written about stealing her and other hurtful comments made her understand that I had not agreed to any of this. It was all part of Toby's scheme. Suddenly, she glared at him. "How dare you!" she yelled, throwing her phone at him, hitting him squarely in the face. "You awful person!" she continued, striking him repeatedly. I held Toby still as he squirmed, unable to defend himself from Kim's angry hits. His face quickly turned red as bruises began to form, but Kim did not hold back. The realization of Toby's deceit and the hurt it caused her made her lash out at him. All the time Kim and I had spent together, our trust in each other felt shattered by Toby's trickery. We had dealt with him for a while, but Toby had gone too far. Who knows what else he might have done if he had waited? That thought frightened me. "Please," Toby muttered weakly, hanging from my hold. Kim paused, perhaps to catch her breath. She sank onto the bed and I let Toby drop to his knees. A few quiet moments passed while Toby seemed to gather his thoughts, probably realizing how foolish he had been. I wasn't sure whether to call the police or just throw him out. At first I had thought about being very harsh with him, but the fighting had calmed my nerves a bit. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it," Toby finally groaned, rubbing his cheek as he stood up. His words hit me forcefully. "We had so much fun. I can give you what you want." "I hate you," Kim said, glaring at him but not doing anything more. "Both of you. You let it happen until... don't act like you haven't been interested in it. Me and Kimberly, the secret, the fantasy. I've seen how you both reacted to things before," Toby continued, gaining confidence. His voice was cool and matter-of-fact. I stood frozen as he spoke. I was taken aback by his boldness and how he had the nerve to say these things, even if he was partly right. It made me furious to hear him express it so openly. I'm feeling uneasy about this. Toby was right. Even though it was hard for me to admit he had a point, I was quiet, unable to respond. Toby looked over at Kimberly, who stared back at him, urging him to continue. "The truth is, both of you enjoy being adventurous and sharing special moments. Now, since things feel strange, you want to blame me for it. But deep down, you know you both like this." His words stung, even if they were true. Kim remained silent, and so did I. Toby just kept talking. I was at a loss for words. Should I be angry? Should I deny what he said? But I couldn't. He was right. "You know I'm right," Toby said. "And I bet Kimberly knows it too. You've enjoyed this, right? You've liked the way I make you feel, haven't you? How I made you feel something special, more than before." He directed this question at her, but she didn't reply. I felt frozen in the moment, unsure of my emotions. Why was I feeling this rush? Toby had been close with my wife in ways I hadn't been, and as much as I tried to ignore it, jealousy bubbled inside me. "And Josh, I know you listened while I was with Kimberly," Toby said. Kim looked shocked, turning her gaze to me. "If it was so awful, why didn't you say anything? You stayed quiet. How long did you wait there after messing with my computer before trying to stop me?" My mouth opened, but no words came out. I felt dry and numb, unable to meet Kimberly's eyes. Toby smiled, a grin that felt cold but said too much without words. "You heard us? I thought you just came home," Kim said, looking confused. "How long were you down there?" I struggled to find the right words, feeling flustered. Toby chuckled, glancing between us, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "I wanted to get rid of the threat of your videos going online," I said. "It would be a disaster if that got out, especially with the broadcasting." "So, you chose that over stopping us? You heard everything? You knew what was happening?" Kim's disbelief was evident. "You listened to what he did to me? Does that mean you saw the videos of us?" Her words faded, the disgust clear on her face. Was it my hesitation that made her feel that way? I realized that I really needed to talk to Kim, just the two of us, to clear things up. I wanted to make sure we understood each other, but before I could do anything, Toby spoke up. "So the idea is that Josh secretly likes this but hasn't faced it yet," Toby said, looking more at Kim than me. It felt like they were both trying to change my mind. I could see Kim holding back an eye roll. Then Toby shocked me. "We could test it," he suggested. It felt like another twist was coming. How could this be happening? I had walked in feeling confident, explained everything to Kim, deleted texts, and had Toby's phone. I didn't understand how he could turn the tables on me. Why would we even test it? There was no point. It felt as if he was suggesting something very intimate with Kim while I watched. There was no way that was happening. "You want me to be with you while Josh watches? You're kidding," Kim said, looking at Toby in disbelief. "No way." "I'm serious, and I think Josh would be okay with it," Toby said with a smirk in my direction. I felt rooted to the spot. This wasn't fair. I had let myself get into a terrible situation. Kim was looking at me, hoping I would say no. I wanted to tell Toby to back off. I didn't even know how everything had shifted. But Toby's boldness to bring this up left me feeling stuck, unable to move. I couldn't help but wonder how Toby got so bold. Did he really understand me so well? Was he just lucky? I didn't know, but I was frustrated because I was somehow involved. I found myself considering the idea of Toby being with Kim again, right there in our home while I watched. "Two," I stammered, unsure of what to say. Part of me thought I wanted this. "I have an app on my phone for the cameras," Toby explained, nodding to a small camera in the corner. It was blinking, showing it was recording. "Why don't we watch? Then we can see the truth of the situation. If you stand there and watch, we'll know for sure." "And why would I do that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I felt overwhelmed. Kim seemed uncertain too. "You want me to just let you be with Kim again?" Saying it out loud felt hard, but that was what he was suggesting, wasn't it? I was aware that it was strange to feel anything positive about this, even though it made me feel ashamed. But I had seen it happen before, and I knew I might feel something watching again. So why would I put myself in that position? It's not like that. I'm not going to get involved with her again, at least not right now. But you could use the recording of what just happened to see how much you really like it. It already happened, and your lovely wife is right here. So you might as well use it, right? Toby argued. I could see he struggled to say those words, even the idea of watching something so unpleasant and feeling anything at all. While Kim and Toby were there, I felt uneasy, yet there was an odd pull inside me. Why can't we just think clearly sometimes? Just moments ago, I felt angry with him, and now he wanted us to watch a recording involving my wife, which was confusing. Was there any good that could come from me watching this? Watching their moment unfold while feeling a mix of emotions and my wife looking at me with confusion? The answer was clearly no. It seemed terrible. Still, the thought of seeing Kim in that moment was oddly captivating. But here I was, hesitating. I looked at Kim. She was also mixed up inside. She should be shocked by the idea, but I could tell she wasn't. She didn't need to admit that she had feelings for Toby. Then Kim looked right at me, searching for something, maybe waiting for a response from me. "Another man, me, knows how your wife feels, and I'm still here. Deep down, you know it's true," Toby said, filling the silence with his words. As he spoke, I felt frozen. I wanted to be angry, but it was hard to ignore the truth in what he was saying. It hurt, and also stirred something inside me, and the look on Kim's face. I felt my cheeks warm. Why wasn't I stopping this? A part of me was curious about where this was going, even though I knew I could end it. That only made me feel worse. Kim was watching me closely, and I could see her tension. Toby was clever. He could see that I was considering his offer, and she noticed I wasn't dismissing it outright. "Oh, Josh," she said softly, "did you actually like it?" I gave a small nod. Kim's breathing quickened, a flush creeping up her face. As she took in this new understanding, I felt embarrassment wash over me. It was difficult to accept my feelings, especially with Toby's words hanging in the air. Toby turned to Kim, clearly pleased. "Do you see how much he's into it, Kimberly? What do you think? Should we give your husband what he wants?" It was a smart move. He was putting the decision in Kim's hands. I looked at my husband, Josh. He seemed embarrassed and flustered, which confused me even more, mixing my own feelings with his reaction. Toby had tricked both of us. but I felt especially foolish. I made a big mistake by getting involved with him, and I couldn't change the past. Still, maybe it wasn't so bad if Josh actually found some enjoyment in it. It was a messed up situation that happened under the wrong circumstances, but maybe Toby was onto something. Perhaps we could find a way to make things right. I wasn't happy about him filming me without my permission, but since it had already happened, maybe it could help us get some answers from Josh. I know it sounds silly, but I wasn't thinking clearly, and I felt desperate. I felt terrible for putting Josh in this situation. I had betrayed him, and I wanted to make things right. Since it was already recorded, we didn't need to repeat anything to prove a point. If Josh didn't like what happened, I would do everything I could to regain his trust and my own sense of honesty. I felt low as it was, and I didn't think a tape could make me feel worse. But if Josh liked it, what would be the harm in finding out? It didn't mean we had to continue in that direction. We could move past it without too much regret. Maybe he would enjoy it too, just like I had. I knew it might seem like I had selfish reasons for this, but deep down, I just wanted to make things right. I wasn't clear on the situation, but I was thinking on my feet, and my mind was still spinning from everything that had happened. If there was a fast way to resolve this without causing more hurt, I hoped that was the right choice. If you think you can handle it, Josh, maybe we could watch it together to help us move on, I suggested. We promised to delete it afterward. Josh's face changed from red to pale. He looked at me with an expression I didn't understand. I felt awful for putting him through this, and it hurt me to see him struggle. But as his wife, I wanted to do everything for him, even if it meant confronting some difficult feelings. He knew that I would do anything for him, and that was how we ended up here. Okay, let's just watch the tape, Josh said with a deep sigh. I threw my arms around him, squeezing him tight and giving him a warm kiss. In that moment, I realized how much I had missed my loving partner. It had been a long time since we had embraced like this. Thank you, I whispered, standing on my toes to reach his ear. I then kissed him softly. If things get tough, we can handle it. We can ask him to leave and focus on us. I won't make such a mistake again. I'll do anything to earn back your trust. I recognized that this was not typical for me. I was usually the tough one, shy when it came to feelings. But this moment called for honesty, and Josh understood. He nodded and smiled gently. Despite everything, we still loved each other. He stroked my hair in a way that only he could. I love you, I said, and kissed him softly again. He quietly replied, I love you too. Then I lay back in bed while Josh sat beside me, leaning against the headboard and facing the TV on the wall. Toby sat on my left, with Josh on my right. As a practical move, Toby leaned over me to hand Josh his phone. Josh hesitantly took the phone and tried to connect it to the TV. The connection was slow, and he sighed heavily. I knew this was hard for him. It felt like a big step. Watching might be tough, but I believed it was necessary. There was a lot he had been holding inside. I didn't want to push him too hard, but his worried look made me think this was the right choice. We can stop at any time, I reminded him. He took my hand, squeezed it, then let go. Let's just get this over with, Josh said, shaking his head and rubbing his forehead. Make yourself comfortable, I suggested, adjusting myself under the blanket. I wanted to help ease the tension, so I turned to kiss his cheek and rested my arm on his shoulder, feeling relaxed next to him. I needed to do this to prepare myself too. Are you ready? I asked, looking at him. In that moment, I felt Toby's hand move under the blanket. I gently pushed it away. This was not the time for distractions. It was important to keep things simple for Josh. If you are, Josh replied, thankfully not noticing the distraction. I pressed play when Toby handed me the remote after finding the right point in the video. The video showed a view from a security camera directed towards our bed. It looked as though Toby and I were sound asleep under the same blanket I had now. It seemed peaceful at first, but then small movements revealed what was happening. Toby was gently pressing against me, and I remembered how I had woken up earlier with him close behind me. The memory of that moment made me feel a sudden warmth, despite everything. Just thinking about what had happened made my breathing slow. The memories of feeling Toby close to me, his arms around me, his warm breath on my neck brought back a wave of emotion. His presence was overwhelming, and as I watched the video, I couldn't help but feel affected by it. The video wasn't just something happening to someone else. It was me. My face, my body, my voice, all caught in the act. Every moment, every sound was so familiar. I could see myself reacting to him, feeling everything all over again, and it stirred something inside me. When I glanced over at Josh, I noticed his intense focus on the screen. He wasn't just watching, he was caught up in what he was seeing. I could tell it was affecting him, just as it was affecting me. The idea that watching me had this effect on him was oddly thrilling. "We can still stop this, you know," I whispered softly, placing a gentle kiss on his shoulder. "We don't have to keep going." He didn't respond, but he held me tighter, wrapping his arm around me. The warmth of his embrace felt so real and comforting. I took a moment to let my hand slide down to his waist, feeling how much I had missed him. It had been so long since we had this kind of closeness. I could feel his excitement growing, and I realized how much I had missed that too. "Everything okay?" I asked, teasing him a little as I noticed his reaction. Josh nodded slightly. "Yeah, I'm fine," he breathed softly. I kissed his jaw gently and whispered, "Just let me know if you want to stop." "Uh-huh," Josh murmured, still focused on the video. I smiled and let out a quiet laugh before returning my attention to the screen. The scene continued, filled with the sounds and moments of intimacy. Despite everything, it was undeniably powerful to watch. It was raw, real, and hard to ignore. I could sense Josh's tension as he focused on the screen. Then, there was a subtle movement to my left. "Play along," Toby whispered softly, making sure Josh couldn't hear. I had almost forgotten he was still in the room. Toby wanted me to push Josh further, to blur the lines even more, but I knew this was as much for Josh's sake as it was Toby's twisted satisfaction. "Do you like the sounds I'm making, babe?" I asked Josh as he stared at the screen, a conflicted look on his face. His neutral expression had finally cracked a bit. In the video, the sounds were clearer now, my voice, my reactions, all too real for both of us. The scene showed Toby spooning me from behind, and I flinched, hearing myself react. I was getting lost in the moment, not just in the memory of what happened, but in how Josh was watching it unfold. The mix of emotions and the tension between us heightened everything, and I felt a strange thrill knowing Josh could see what I had done. Without warning, I felt Toby's hand under the blanket. I knew what he was trying to do, but I gently tried to push him away. He still managed to slide his fingers under my grasp, making me gasp in surprise. My body responded automatically, and I fought to maintain control, but it was difficult. Toby knew how to manipulate the situation, and the added tension from Josh sitting next to me made everything more intense. Josh, still absorbed in the video, seemed torn, but slightly more relaxed than before. "You look really good, hon," he finally said, a small smile breaking through his otherwise tense expression. His words brought a wave of relief over me. I turned my attention back to him, hoping to regain some control over the situation. On the screen, the video had reached its peak, and my past self was reacting to Toby's actions. The emotions I was battling in the present mirrored what was happening in the video, and I struggled to keep my focus. Toby's hand, however, continued its teasing, his fingers curling in just the right way, making me fight harder to suppress any audible reaction. Josh looked over for a moment, sensing something, but he didn't seem to notice what was really happening beneath the blanket. The temptation was growing, and my mind was clouded. Maybe, I thought, Josh might be okay with more after all. He hadn't reacted negatively so far, but I wasn't sure, and the uncertainty left me torn between the intensity of the moment and the desire to stop everything before it spiraled further. Toby, seeing Josh's focus return to the screen, resumed his hidden advances, leaving me struggling to stay composed. The room was filled with unspoken tension, and I wasn't sure how long we could keep this up. I realized I needed to include Josh in the moment before things spiraled out of control again. Slowly, I started to stroke his hand while trying to keep things grounded. Toby, meanwhile, kept doing his thing under the blanket as we continued watching the video play out on the screen. Suddenly, Josh appeared in the video. His shadow was visible in the doorway, watching Toby and me on the bed. I was shocked. He had been there early on, seeing more than I expected before he finally confronted us. It made me wonder if his anger had stemmed more from regret than the act itself. This was definitely something we'd have to talk about later. But in the video, Josh didn't move. He just stood there, watching Toby with me. No yelling, no fighting, just silent observation. It was strange, almost surreal. Seeing myself in that vulnerable moment, fully in the act while Josh stood there, made me wonder what his breaking point had been. "You just stood there and watched?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. It was difficult to focus with everything going on, my pulse racing, while I kept my hand on Josh. Josh's body reacted to my words. He didn't seem upset. In fact, he was responding in a way that surprised me. Watching the video, I began to realize this wasn't just something he tolerated, it was something he had chosen to witness. He could have left, could have stopped everything, but he didn't. "Honey, you were really okay with that part? Seeing me with him like this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. I needed to know how Josh truly felt. He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I guess I was just shocked at first. I didn't know what to expect when I saw you both there, especially in our bedroom," he admitted, his voice low and unsure. I pressed further, gently. "But watching, that didn't bother you? Seeing someone else like that with me?" The idea that he had been watching, and maybe even enjoying it, made my mind spin with mixed emotions. Josh's response, his physical reaction, was all I needed to know. He was clearly affected by the video and the memory of what he'd seen. Toby's continued teasing, and the intensity of the moment was pushing me toward the edge, but I knew I needed to keep things under control. The situation was building up inside me, with the video playing in the background, and I could feel my own excitement growing. I didn't want to cause any more tension or drama, but the realization that Josh was getting turned on by it was too much to ignore. I knew if Josh took things further, it would be more than I could handle. The feelings were overwhelming, but I was trying to keep everything balanced between us. My thoughts felt clouded, overwhelmed by the situation I found myself in. "Shh," I whispered quietly, signaling for Toby to stop. I heard him scoff softly, but instead of pulling back, he changed his approach. He started gently stroking, sending waves of sensation through me. I felt my body react instantly. Toby had a way of knowing exactly what to do, and rather than stop altogether, he continued with careful precision. I felt a sudden jolt of intensity as he touched me in just the right way, and I couldn't help but tense up. It was almost surreal, all of this happening while Josh was right there, watching the video of us on the screen. The video played out, showing me in a vulnerable moment, and Josh didn't move. He hadn't moved then, and he didn't move now. I decided to push things just a little further, testing where the line truly was. "Josh," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, "if you want to see it for real, not just on the video, look over here." His eyes widened as he turned to see what was happening. His expression was one of confusion, mixed with something deeper. He saw Toby's hand under the blanket, and I could sense the tension in the room growing. I bit my lip, feeling torn between the intensity of the moment and the reality of what I was doing. Toby's presence was undeniable, but it was Josh's reaction that held my attention. He didn't say anything, but I could tell from the way he looked at me that he was conflicted. There was something almost painful in his gaze, and yet he didn't stop me. "Want me to stop?" Toby's voice cut through the silence, daring Josh to react. Josh's jaw tightened, and I could feel the weight of the situation hanging in the air. My heart raced as I locked eyes with him, unsure of what he would do next. Yet, there was no denying the attraction that lingered in his eyes, even in the midst of the jealousy. Then, it happened. My body tensed, and a rush of warmth spread through me as I felt the peak building inside. It was a moment of pure sensation, heightened by the tension in the room. I gasped, feeling it take over me, and for a split second everything else faded away. I'm almost there," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I fought to keep control. Josh remained silent, his eyes fixed on me, watching as the moment unfolded. His presence, his restraint, and the way he watched it all happen added a strange new layer to the situation. I couldn't explain it, but something about that made the moment even more intense. As I finally reached the edge, my body trembled, and I fought to stay composed. I gripped Josh's arm tightly as everything came crashing down. It was overwhelming, and for a brief moment I couldn't think straight. I barely registered the fact that Toby had moved closer, his presence still lingering nearby. But this wasn't about Toby anymore. It was about something deeper, something more complicated. I had pushed things too far, and now I was left to face the consequences. I looked into Josh's eyes, feeling a mix of emotions as I tried to make sense of everything happening around me. Toby's presence was undeniable, but Josh was still there, watching, and I wasn't sure what he was thinking. As Toby's movements brushed against me under the blanket, I could see the tension in Josh's face. His expression was tight, his eyebrows drawn together as if he was torn between wanting to look away and being unable to. "Does this feel good?" I asked Josh softly, hoping for some clarity. He didn't respond at first, but a deep breath escaped him, and I could tell this was affecting him deeply. "Is it okay if this happens?" I asked again, carefully choosing my words. I wasn't sure if he was ready to see more, but I wanted to give him the choice. His eyes met mine, and after a long pause, he gave a small nod. I took it as his approval, though I could see the inner conflict in his face. I kept my gaze on Josh as I felt the shift beside me. Toby was moving, his actions slow and deliberate, but I still watched Josh, hoping to understand what he was feeling. His eyes stayed on mine, never leaving as I held on to the moment, waiting for a signal that this was going too far. Toby moved gently, making it clear what would happen next. I stayed focused on Josh, waiting for him to react, but he remained still, his expression tense. This was uncharted territory for all of us, but I had to keep moving forward to see where we all stood. I felt the tension build, the weight of everything hanging in the air as Toby began to push forward. I winced slightly, and Josh exhaled sharply, his eyes never leaving mine. The feeling of the moment hit hard, but I smiled softly at Josh, hoping to reassure him that everything was still under control. This wasn't just about what was happening physically, but the emotional layers that ran beneath it. As things progressed, I could see the turmoil in Josh's eyes. He was a part of this now, no matter how conflicted he felt. His silence told me he was letting this happen, even if it wasn't easy for him. Toby's movements became more pronounced, but I stayed focused on Josh, trying to understand the thoughts running through his mind. We had started something that couldn't be undone, but I knew we needed to continue, to push through the confusion and see what it meant for us. As things unfolded, the guilt and tension I had felt earlier started to fade, replaced by a new understanding. This was about more than just the moment. There was a deeper layer we were all exploring, even if none of us fully understood it yet. Josh remained silent, his face a mixture of emotions, but his presence was enough to know that he was still there with me, even as things continued to move forward. We were in this together, no matter how strange it all seemed. I felt overwhelmed, like my thoughts were slipping away as the moment took over. Everything around me seemed to blur and I could barely think straight. "Josh," I murmured, trying to keep my focus on him. "Toby is right here. This is happening, right next to you." My voice was soft as I tried to understand what this meant for all of us. "How do you feel?" Josh's eyes met mine. "Jealous, angry," he admitted, his expression conflicted. I wanted to make things better, to bring some comfort despite the strange situation we found ourselves in. I leaned toward Josh, hoping to ease the tension, but it was hard to focus when everything around me felt so intense. Toby, meanwhile, moved with confidence, as if he knew exactly what to do. His steady movements made it impossible for me to keep my thoughts clear. I found myself caught up in the rhythm, unable to control the rising emotion within me. The pressure built until it was too much, leaving me feeling lost in a haze of sensations. Without thinking, Toby shifted my position, and the room filled with the sounds of movement, of bodies adjusting and the bed creaking beneath us. The atmosphere was thick, the air heavy with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite process. I tried to focus on Josh, but everything seemed to spin out of control. Each sound seemed louder than the last, the bed, our breathing, and the tension in the room. I felt the world around me slipping away as everything built towards something I couldn't fully understand. It was a strange and overwhelming experience, one that left me unsure of where we stood or what came next. All the while, I could sense the weight of the moment hanging over us. I wanted to pull away, to take a step back and figure out how we'd gotten here, but it felt impossible. The situation had its own momentum, and I could only go along with it, caught in the rush of it all. I turned to check on Josh, realizing how loud I had been, but he wasn't there anymore. "Toby, wait," I began. But before I could finish, Toby shifted, hitting that familiar spot that made me lose control. The overwhelming feeling left me breathless. "Look at me, Kimberly," Toby commanded, his hand grazing my neck. It wasn't just his size or presence that made me feel this way. It was how easily he could take control of the moment, how every move seemed so deliberate. There was no hesitation, and that was what had drawn me in. I felt guilty for how much pleasure I was experiencing, knowing Josh had left, but I couldn't stop myself. Toby's control was relentless, and I felt completely consumed by the moment. "Open your mouth," Toby ordered. I complied, and soon I was left stunned by the intensity of everything, barely able to think. He took pleasure in the control he had, and for a brief moment everything else faded away. But even after all that, the energy in the room hadn't lessened. Toby flipped me onto my stomach, his intentions clear. "Ready?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. "Go for it," I replied. Toby didn't hold back, and the force of his actions made it clear there was no turning back. It was intense, shaking my whole body with every move. The sound of the moment filled the room, a constant reminder of how far things had gone. "Where do you want it?" Toby growled as the moment neared its peak. "Wherever you want," I whispered back. He didn't hesitate, and with one final push, everything reached its end. I gasped at the intensity, feeling completely overwhelmed. It was over, but the weight of everything hung heavy in the air. "I'm feeling really anxious." Toby pulled away from me, and I could feel a mix of emotions flooding in. As I looked around, I realized Josh was missing. I hadn't seen him leave, and now I felt a strong need to find him. Suddenly, my thoughts cleared a bit. Toby didn't seem to care, probably because he wasn't thinking about Josh, but I quickly sat up. It felt strange to search for my husband after what had just happened. "Where did he go?" I asked. Toby didn't respond. He seemed satisfied with himself. I got out of bed and grabbed my robe from the floor. I didn't want to be bare anymore. A wave of shame washed over me, and I just wanted to find my husband. Then I heard hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. Josh was coming back, and he was moving quickly. The door burst open, and Josh rushed in with something in his hand. Toby quickly got out of bed, raising his hands, but Josh swung at Toby. I stood frozen, seeing the anger in Josh's eyes. This wasn't jealousy. It was pure rage. "Josh, don't!" I yelled, almost instinctively. But I realized I was wrong to think that way. It was a mistake letting things go as they did. I watched as Josh lifted his arm, ready to strike again. He didn't hear my plea as he swung again. "You're in big trouble!" Toby cried out as the object hit his hand, and he quickly moved away from Josh to get back on his feet. He didn't have any witty comebacks or tricks left. Instead, he tried to take the object from Josh, but Josh was too strong and held him back. Toby struggled, but he was overpowered, and his efforts slowly faded away. I watched helplessly, knowing he passed out. Before I could worry, Josh let go of Toby with an annoyed sigh and stood over him, deep in thought. "Josh," I called softly. "Great," Josh muttered, standing up and leaving Toby on the floor. Without hesitating, Josh left the room and went downstairs. I quickly followed him, forgetting about my robe. I was too worried to think about anything else. A few moments later, I found him by the pool area. It was as if he had changed completely. He looked shattered from everything that had happened. He stood by the edge of the pool, looking into the water with a blank expression, the lights highlighting his good looks. Today had been a wild day for both of us, and even though I had felt good a little while ago, I knew I had hurt him. I felt fine physically, but my feelings were a different story. Seeing the confusion and sadness on his face caused a tear to roll down my cheek. I was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. "Josh," I said quietly, moving closer to him, wearing my robe for some sense of modesty. I had tried to shake off the trouble from earlier, my mistake in acting so foolishly, but I couldn't help but feel that I had made things worse. He stayed silent, and I didn't want to press him. I had pushed enough already, so we just stood there. The water sparkled, and the smell of chlorine filled the air while the night sky was dark. I wondered what he was thinking, but felt it was better to let him speak first. I owed him that much. Actually, I owed him everything. We never had fights or big arguments. I didn't know what to expect. Our relationship had seemed so good that maybe I had ignored the impact of my actions. The hardest part was that it wasn't even a fight. Josh was just quiet. That was the worst. It wasn't like him, and it hurt me deeply. After a few minutes, maybe 10, he finally broke the silence. "Do you love him?" Josh asked, still looking at the water. "No," I answered quickly. "Never. Just the moment." His eyes seemed distant, and it was tearing me apart. "Do you still love me?" "Yes. So much," I said softly. Josh offered a faint smile and glanced at me for a moment before going quiet again as he gathered his thoughts. I felt like a car stuck on the tracks, waiting for the train. He sighed heavily. "I think that's why it hurts so much for me to see you with him, because you look happy. You seem to be enjoying it so much, and it broke my heart to see you like that. Maybe in another world things could have been different, but now it all feels spoiled." He sighed again. I stood frozen, feeling the cold air on my skin, taking in his words. They affected me deeply, but I stayed silent. "I just wish you could see yourself, you know? It's like you're not the same person. That scares me. I don't know what happened. Then I went to calm down and saw something that made me really angry. I didn't want to lose control again. It's like I have this thing I can't seem to control, and it ends up hurting me." He finally looked me in the eyes. They were beautiful and full of feeling, yet so cold and distant. It made me feel really uneasy. "What do you want, Kim?" he asked. "This can't keep happening. It's really bothering me. Sometimes in the moment I get excited, but I don't think I can do this again. It's just not who I am. It's too much." "I promise I won't do it again," I replied quickly, and I meant it. I never would have done it if it wasn't for, the phone situation. I've been so foolish. I can't believe how foolish I've been. I know I'm partly to blame. We got too close to the edge, allowing a little here and there, and then we messed it all up," Josh said, sitting down on a chair. "I can't change what happened, and I'll regret it forever," I admitted, wanting to make things right. Pushing things today was a mistake. Or maybe with Toby. I don't even know anymore. I haven't had a moment to think about everything since you left. There was a long pause. "He wanted to come between us," Josh said quietly, a small smile forming on his lips. "He wants you for himself." The thought of a world where Josh didn't love me, where I didn't love him, hurt a lot. I had seen the messages, but there was still so much to understand. Looking back, Josh was probably right. What I took as playful words might have meant more. I shook my head. "Toby's just trying to mess with us, and we got caught up in his nonsense," I said, almost pleading. But Josh's silence worried me. "Do you want him, though?" "What?" I responded, shocked and upset. "Absolutely not. He's out of my life. You're all I need," I told him, taking a step closer. He stayed still, neither moving back nor forward, but I had to ask. "Josh, are we okay?" Josh finally seemed to come out of his thinking and looked at me, surprised. Even though he hadn't answered, his reaction spoke volumes. "Of course, Kim," he said, standing up and holding my arms. "I will always love you, no matter what. What happened before is in the past." I nodded, tears starting to form in my eyes. I'm not usually one to cry, but everything mixed together as Josh reassured me. He hugged me and we stayed like that for a while, him rubbing my back and me sniffing. I wasn't sure if I was happy that Josh was still mine, or angry at Toby for trying to trick us. It felt like a swirl of emotions made my tears fall. "It was a bad idea. A really bad idea," Josh said softly. "It's like drinking. It can taste good, but too much can really hurt you. Having fun is okay, but I think we had too much fun, if you can even call it that." "So, can we move on? Do you think so?" I asked, trying to be brave. "Well, I still want you to be my wife. This is something we can't change, so we have to find a way to move on," Josh said, showing more maturity. He took me by the shoulders and looked into my eyes, smiling. "But first, I need to find him." I laughed and playfully tapped his chest. He smiled and hugged me tight. It felt wonderful to be close to him. His warmth and protection made me feel safe. I didn't want him to leave, but I knew things would be different now. I needed to make things right. I just had to figure out how. Being with other men wasn't going to help, based on how the night had gone. "Let's go look for him," Josh said, as if he were searching for someone who had taken the last weights. Josh was one of the strongest people I knew. From what I had seen, he could easily handle Toby, If he wanted to toss him into the pool, he would do it without much trouble. Not that I would mind. I would support him if it came to that. So we set off to find him. We searched the living room, the kitchen, the guest bathroom, and even the front and backyards. We checked our bedroom, every bathroom, and every guest room on all the floors. He was nowhere to be found. It was almost like he had disappeared. Maybe he realized it was time to leave. That was probably for the best. I didn't really think Josh would hurt him, but it would have been good to see some sort of closure regarding Toby, whether it was Josh confronting him or just sending him away. But no, Toby was gone. It had been 2 months since that night. Josh and I had talked a lot. We discussed boundaries, our marriage, and most importantly, ourselves. We tried to understand why we acted the way we did. In the end, we realized we were both young and a bit careless. We sometimes pursued fun without thinking. I like to believe our marriage is stronger than before, but that doesn't mean we are perfect. We both agreed not to revisit the idea of being with others like before, especially since it had gone so poorly the first time. I have to admit, I didn't see Josh as the type to let others take advantage of him. I regretted leaving him out of the decision. We agreed to work through our issues together. As for the other parts of our relationship, we decided to keep exploring, but only when we both felt comfortable and not on a whim. We needed to communicate clearly, especially since Josh had been the one hurt by my actions. We'll have to see where this journey takes us and where it leads. I had some ideas about how to fix things and make them enjoyable, but that's a story for another time. Maybe it was time for another gathering to help ease some tension, something fun and lighthearted. We'll see what happens. What I do know is that, with a sense of relief, this was not the end for Josh and me. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.